Cleopatra, the name alone is enough to make you curious. Was she an Egyptian or Greek? What was her connection to the famous lighthouse of Alexandria? Now, picture yourself as the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, also known as Cleopatra VII. Born in 69 BC, your father, Ptolemy XII, king of Egypt, had a name change. Originally, he went by the Greek name of Ptolemy, but changed it to Caesar when he decided to honor the Roman general Julius Caesar, who had helped him secure the throne. It was during this time that Cleopatra was born and named after her mother, Cleopatra VII, and she had been raised in a different culture with different customs and traditions. That's why when she met Caesar, she decided to impress him by disguising herself as the Egyptian goddess of love, Aphrodite. Yes, you heard that right. She literally showed up at his doorstep dressed as a goddess, complete with all the makeup and props, and it worked like a charm. Caesar was totally taken by her charm and allure, and soon they were having an affair. Did Julius Caesar really father her first child? What about that rumor of her having 8 children in total? But the celebrations were short-lived, as Antony's political enemies began stirring up trouble. They accused him of abandoning his duties and neglecting his responsibilities. And to make matters worse, Cleopatra was seen as a foreigner who was trying to control the Roman Empire from the shadows. But thanks to Caesar's help, Cleopatra was able to defeat her sister and secure her place as the ruler of Egypt. Octavian and his fleet attacked Antony's forces, catching them off guard. Despite their best efforts, Antony's forces were defeated, and he was forced to flee to Alexandria with Cleopatra. He wanted to create a structure that would be a marvel of the ancient world and a testament to his power and wealth. The lighthouse stood over 100 meters tall and was visible for miles. It guided ships into the harbor and served as a symbol of safety and security. Unfortunately, it was destroyed by a series of earthquakes between 1303 and 1480, leaving us with only stories and ruins to remember its grandeur. Suddenly, Cleopatra was at the center of a web of deceit and betrayal. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new videos. They built palaces, hosted parties, and enjoyed the fruits of their labor. But the good times didn't last forever. Octavian was hot on their trail, and he was determined to bring them to justice. Soon, Octavian and Mark Antony were at war, and Cleopatra was caught in the middle. Her son Caesarion was executed by order of Octavian, who wanted to solidify his power by eliminating any potential rivals. Her daughter Cleopatra Selene, who had been taken to India as a hostage, was also killed when Octavian's soldiers invaded. Only one of Cleopatra's children survived, her son Ptolemy, who had been left in Egypt under the care of his grandmother. He inherited the throne after Cleopatra's death, but he was more interested in debauchery than ruling. Eventually, he was forced to share the throne with his sister, Cleopatra Thea, and then he disappeared from history altogether, leaving us to wonder what could have been. For 2 years, Cleopatra and Antony resisted the attacks, but eventually they ran out of supplies and had to surrender. According to legend, Cleopatra took her own life rather than be captured by Octavian. Some say she did it by holding an ASP, a venomous snake, close to her heart, while others believe she swallowed a pill containing a lethal poison. Either way, her death was swift and painless, unlike the fate that befell Mark Antony. To make things worse, Mark Antony was already married to Octavian's sister Octavia, so Cleopatra and Mark Antony kept their relationship a secret for a while. Finally, he was granted permission to take his own life, and he chose to do so by slashing his own throat. First, Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, leaving Cleopatra to fend for herself. And then there was this guy named Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, who was determined to take over the Roman Empire. And guess who got in his way? You guessed it, Cleopatra. Together, they gave birth to a son named Caesarion, who was declared correct. But don't let his title fool you. He was basically a figurehead, while Cleopatra was the real power behind the throne. But the plan backfired. When Arsinoe revealed the affair between Antony and Cleopatra, Octavia refused to forgive them and took her own life. Antony's wife was now dead, and he was free to marry Cleopatra. But there was a problem. The Roman Senate didn't approve of this union, and considered Cleopatra a threat to the stability of the empire. And how did her life end? Well, there are plenty of rumors and myths surrounding this legendary queen, but who was she really? This is the life of Cleopatra VII, Queen of Intrigue. Imagine living in ancient Egypt, where the heat of the desert is only rivaled by the passion of its people, and the power struggles for the throne are even hotter. When Cleopatra was just 14 years old, Her father married her to her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, but their relationship wasn't exactly what you'd call passionate. Unfortunately, the sisters soon realized that running a kingdom wasn't as easy as it looked. But wait, hold on, let's rewind a bit. You see, Cleopatra was no ordinary woman. She was a force to be reckoned with. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also smart, cunning, and ambitious. And she knew how to use her powers to get what she wanted. When she met Caesar, she was determined to win him over and secure his support for her claim to the throne. But she wasn't going to do it in a way you might expect. They were constantly fighting with each other, and it was clear that they couldn't rule effectively. In fact, Ptolemy didn't like Cleopatra at all and banished her from the palace, forcing her to live in a temple. However, Cleopatra wasn't going to take this lying down. She teamed up with her sister, Arsinoe IV, and together they plotted to get rid of their father and claim the throne for themselves. But then something unexpected happened. Ptolemy died suddenly and mysteriously, leaving Cleopatra and Arsinoe to inherit the kingdom jointly. After giving birth to twins, Cleopatra fled to Rome with her children, hoping for support from Caesar, the great Roman general and dictator. You see, Cleopatra wasn't just any ordinary Egyptian queen. She was Greek, not Egyptian. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, Arsinoe was causing trouble by making alliances with Cleopatra's enemies. But as we all know, being a powerful ruler comes with its own set of problems. At first, Cleopatra tried to stay out of the conflict, but then she made the mistake of aligning herself with Mark Antony, one of Caesar's allies. As the conflict with Octavian intensified, Cleopatra sent her sister Arsinoe to persuade Antony's wife Octavia to break off the alliance. Despite the disapproval, Antony and Cleopatra had a grand wedding ceremony in 36 BC, which was attended by guests from all over the Mediterranean. To defend himself, Antony assembled a fleet of warships and prepared for battle. But before he could make a move, Cleopatra's enemies struck first. Back in Alexandria, Antony and Cleopatra lived in luxury, far from the chaos and destruction caused by the war. In 32 BC, Octavian and his fleet arrived in Alexandria ready to lay siege to the city. He was taken to Rome as a prisoner and paraded through the streets while people shouted and threw objects at him. As for Cleopatra's children, they didn't fare much better. Now, if you're still wondering about the lighthouse of Alexandria, it was actually built around 280 BC by Ptolemy I, who was the first ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom. Did you find the video interesting? Tell us in the comments. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt, has left an indelible mark on history. From her legendary beauty to her tragic demise, her story has captivated the human imagination for centuries. But what if I were to tell you that there's more to Cleopatra than meets the eye? What if she wasn't just a femme fatale, but also a shrewd businesswoman with a passion for science? Join me on a journey as we uncover the fascinating secrets of Cleopatra and separate fact from fiction. You won't believe what we found. Well, modern depictions often portray Cleopatra as a stunningly beautiful woman with flawless skin and luscious locks. But it's important to remember that these images are often idealized or even fabricated. That's right, she wasn't just a scheming seductress. She sold incense, spices, and perfume to merchants traveling along the Nile River. And she also had a monopoly on the production of papyrus, a type of paper made from the papyrus plant that was used throughout the ancient world. Let us know in the comments below. Also, before you go, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fascinating content. We've got plenty more videos coming your way that'll make you think, laugh, and gasp in surprise. So don't miss out. Stay tuned and keep those comments coming. We can't wait to see what you have to say. But perhaps Cleopatra's greatest business accomplishment was her management of the Egyptian economy. When she took power, Egypt was in a state of chaos and the economy was in sharp decline, but Cleopatra quickly got to work. She introduced a new currency, stabilized prices, and balanced the budget. She also built new roads and canals to facilitate trade and appointed competent officials to oversee the collection of taxes. Thanks to Cleopatra's economic policies, Egypt was able to prosper and become one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the ancient world. She was also a lover of knowledge and beauty. Cleopatra's library was one of the largest in the ancient world, and she commissioned many works of art and architecture. She also hosted famous intellectuals such as the poet Catullus and the philosopher. Cleopatra was particularly interested in mathematics and astronomy, and she is said to have kept an accurate record of the stars in the sky. She was also fascinated by alchemy, the study of the properties of substances and the transformation of matter. In fact, some historians believe that Cleopatra was the first person to discover the element plutonium. Now, that's pretty impressive. We have very little to go on when it comes to what Cleopatra actually looked like. Most of our ideas are based on Roman propaganda that often painted her in a negative light. She was a complex and multifaceted individual who was a force to be reckoned with. While she may have met a tragic end, losing her life at the young age of 39, her legacy continues to live on through the ages. Cleopatra's own image was carefully crafted and controlled, and she likely used her appearance to her advantage. In fact, Cleopatra may have been the original femme fatale, a cunning seductress who knew how to use her sexuality to get what she wanted. She was said to be charismatic and charming, and she used these traits to great effect in her personal and professional life. Cleopatra understood the power of first impressions and went to great lengths to ensure that she looked her best when she met with important people. She wore expensive perfumes and fine clothing, and she accessorized with jewelry made of gold and precious stones. She was also said to have been very particular about her diet and exercise regimen, and she likely had a team of servants helping her to maintain her appearance. Despite the idealized images of Cleopatra that we see today, it's important to remember that she was likely just a regular person with flaws but she was also a master of self-presentation who knew how to use her appearance to her advantage. Whether she was born with stunning good looks or learned how to cultivate them, Cleopatra's beauty remains one of the most enduring aspects of her legacy. Born into the Ptolemaic dynasty in 69 BC, Cleopatra was no ordinary ruler. As you probably already know, Cleopatra was romantically involved with two famous Roman generals, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But the truth about these relationships is much more complicated than what you might have learned in history class. For starters, Cleopatra wasn't just a helpless damsel who fell in love with these powerful men. She was a skilled manipulator who knew how to play the game of power and influence. She used her charm and wit to gain favor with Caesar and Antony, and she wasn't afraid to use her sexuality to get what she wanted. In fact, Cleopatra was so skilled at this that she became the subject of much gossip and scandal during her lifetime. People couldn't help but speculate about her relationships with these powerful men and her reputation as a femme fatale. So while Cleopatra's love life may seem scandalous by today's standards, it was all part of her strategy to secure her power and influence. She wasn't just a pretty face. She was a cunning leader who knew how to play the cards she was dealt. And in the world of ancient Egypt, having a little bit of scandal never hurt. Let's start by debunking one of the most enduring myths surrounding Cleopatra, her ethnicity. In fact, there are many similarities between Cleopatra's Egypt and the description of Atlantis provided by Plato. Both civilizations were known for their advanced knowledge of science and technology, their powerful navies, and their strategic location near the sea. It's possible that Plato was actually referring to Cleopatra's Egypt when he wrote about Atlantis. This would make Cleopatra the real-life Cleopatra. Contrary to popular belief, Cleopatra was not Egyptian. She was Greek-Macedonian by descent. Her ancestors were the same people who had conquered Greece and then Egypt. However, Cleopatra identified herself as Egyptian and learned the language to connect with her subjects. She was proud of her Egyptian heritage and used it to legitimize her rule. Unlike her predecessors, Cleopatra did not see herself as a foreign ruler exploiting Egypt for her own gain. Instead, she embraced Egyptian culture and traditions, making every effort to be seen as a true daughter of the Nile. This is evident in her choice of symbols, her use of the Egyptian language, and her patronage of the arts and sciences. Did you know that Cleopatra may have actually been the inspiration behind the famous lost city of Atlantis? Moving on, let's talk about Cleopatra's education. She didn't just sit around waiting for her father to die so she could inherit the throne. No, my friend. Cleopatra was ambitious and took charge of her own destiny. At the age of 14, she ascended to the throne jointly with her father, Ptolemy XII, becoming the first woman to rule Egypt in over 100 years. During her reign, she was tutored by the Greek philosopher Athenodorus. Was impressed by Cleopatra's intelligence and thirst for knowledge and tailored her education accordingly. He encouraged her to read the works of Homer and Sappho and to study mathematics and astronomy. This education proved to be invaluable. As Cleopatra grew up and took on the responsibilities of ruling a kingdom, she was well versed in the classics and could hold her own in a debate with the most learned scholars of her day. But it wasn't just about books and scrolls. Cleopatra's education was also practical. She learned how to manage a household, negotiate with foreign rulers, and command an army. She was a quick learner and soon became a formidable ruler in her own right. She was also multilingual and could speak Egyptian, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, and Latin. This made it easier for her to communicate with her diverse subjects and forge alliances with other kingdoms. Overall, Cleopatra's education played a crucial role in shaping her into the iconic leader that we remember today. Now let's move on to Cleopatra's appearance. Was she really as beautiful as they say? Next up, let's talk about Cleopatra's love life. But it's not all about romance. Did you know that Cleopatra was also a patron of the arts and sciences? But wait, there's more. Cleopatra was also a businesswoman. That's right, this Egyptian queen knew how to make a profit. As we wrap up our discussion about Cleopatra, it's clear that she was far from the caricature that history has often painted her to be. And now it's time for you to join the conversation. What do you think of Cleopatra? Did you find this video informative or entertaining? I am the director of a museum. I have a degree in Egyptology and classics. And today we are going to look at why Cleopatra was more than just a seductress. Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, often finds herself portrayed in popular culture as nothing more than a femme fatale. You know, a woman who uses her sexuality to get what she wants. A seductress. However, this perception of Cleopatra has no basis in reality. In fact, it is the result of a series of misinterpretations, misrepresentations, and outright fabrications that have perpetuated throughout history. During the Victorian era, writers like Sir Edward Bulwer-Lytton and Pierre Benoit created fictional narratives that emphasized Cleopatra's romantic entanglements with both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But the marriage was short-lived as Ptolemy XIII died under mysterious circumstances just a few years later. Some sources suggest that he may have been assassinated, but the details are unclear. Upon her brother's death, Cleopatra assumed the throne as the sole ruler of Egypt. The Roman civil war is raging, dividing the powerful republic into two camps, led by the ambitious Gaius Julius Caesar and his rival, Pompey the Great. As the tides of war turn, Pompey seeks refuge in Egypt, hoping to find support from the kingdom's queen Cleopatra. However, upon his arrival, he is met with a surprising ultimatum. He demanded that Cleopatra hand over her rival, but she refused. This led to a confrontation between Caesar's forces and the Egyptians, resulting in the Battle of the Nile. Not only had she lost the love of her life, but she had also lost a valuable ally. Antony had come to Alexandria to negotiate a peace treaty with Cleopatra, but soon found himself captivated by her charm and intelligence. What began as a political alliance quickly developed into a passionate love affair, much to the disapproval of his wife, Octavia, whom he had been pressured to marry for political reasons. This affair would have a profound impact on Cleopatra's life and the course of history. With Caesar's death, the power structure in Rome was thrown into chaos, leaving Cleopatra's future uncertain. With these new additions to her family, Cleopatra's determination to secure a lasting legacy for herself and her children grew even stronger. She began to assert her influence beyond the borders of Egypt, extending her reach into Syria, Cyprus, and parts of Asia Minor. He annexed Egypt as a province of Rome, ending the Ptolemaic dynasty and incorporating it into the growing Roman Empire. Thus, with the death of Cleopatra, an era came to a close, leaving behind a legacy that would continue to fascinate and inspire for centuries to come. This expansion of her kingdom would not come without its challenges. However, as it drew the attention of Octavian, who saw Cleopatra's growing power as a threat to his own ambitions, the stage was set for a dramatic showdown as Octavian and Antony's alliance crumbled, leading to the outbreak of the civil war known as the War of Actium. Despite the upheaval, Cleopatra was determined to protect her own interests and secure the future of her kingdom. This defeat marked the end of their reign and the beginning of Egypt's occupation by Rome. Cleopatra, facing the imminent loss of her kingdom, chose to end her own life rather than submit to her enemies. She took her own life, most likely, by allowing an asp, a type of venomous snake, to bite her. According to legend, she allowed this to happen rather than be captured by Octavian and paraded through Rome in chains. Mark Antony, hearing of Cleopatra's death, also took his own life, ending the lives of two of history's most iconic rulers. She quickly forged a new alliance with Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, who would later become the first emperor of Rome, Augustus. By aligning herself with the new Roman leadership, Cleopatra was able to maintain her kingdom's independence and ensure its continued prosperity. Caesar's naval commander, Marcus Junius Brutus, persuaded him that the best course of action was to take Cleopatra out of the equation and bring her to Rome as a trophy of his victory. They sneaked into the temple where Pompey was hiding and stole him away, taking him back to Caesar. True to her word, Cleopatra did not try to stop them. Cleopatra, intrigued by the charismatic leader, refuses to grant him asylum unless he first agrees to end the civil war and restore order to Rome. But as he attempted to board a ship, he was recognized by a centurion in Caesar's army and stabbed to death. Caesar then returned to Alexandria to collect the spoils of war, including Cleopatra as his prize. Despite her initial fears, Cleopatra's worst suspicions were not confirmed. Caesar treated her with respect and admiration, recognizing her intelligence and wit. Their relationship developed into a genuine romance, and they had a son together Together, they ruled over Egypt, ushering in a period of prosperity and stability. Caesar was captivated by Cleopatra's charm and intelligence, seeing in her a partner who could match his own ambition and intellect. Cleopatra, too, was drawn to Caesar's charisma and power, recognizing in him a potential ally in her own schemes. Pompey, desperate for aid, reluctantly accepts her terms, unaware that he is walking into a trap. However, she was only 18 years old and her power was challenged by her own mother, Queen Cleopatra V. Determined to eliminate any opposition, Caesar set sail for Alexandria with the intention of capturing Pompey and bringing him to justice. She had already made up her mind that she did not want to side with either Caesar or Pompey in the civil war. Instead, she wanted to keep her options open and use the conflict to her advantage. To achieve this, she agreed to meet Pompey in secret, but only on the condition that he hide in her temple. At the same time, she sent a message to Caesar, inviting him to visit her in Alexandria. Caesar accepted the invitation and arrived with his army. Cleopatra welcomed him warmly, playing the role of the perfect host. But behind the scenes, she was desperately trying to hide Pompey from his rival. As Caesar's fleet arrives, Cleopatra finds herself torn between her growing feelings for him and her obligation to honor her agreement with Pompey. With tensions rising, Cleopatra must now navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics, balancing the demands of two powerful leaders and protecting the interests of her kingdom. But as the drama unfolds, it becomes clear that Cleopatra's choices will have far-reaching consequences, shaping not only the fate of Rome, but also the course of her own destiny. This power struggle between Cleopatra and her mother highlights the turbulent political landscape of ancient Egypt and the lengths to which people would go to secure their position of power. It also demonstrates Cleopatra's resilience and determination from an early age. Ultimately, Cleopatra emerged victorious from her battle for the throne, showcasing her strength and strategic thinking. This early experience in navigating the complexities of politics would serve her well throughout her life and help shape her into the formidable ruler she became, portraying her as an exotic temptress who used her wiles on these powerful men. This was a deliberate choice to emphasize her connection to the royal lineage of the Ptolemies and distance herself from her mother. This move demonstrates Cleopatra's desire to establish her own identity within the royal family and legitimize her rule. By invoking her father's memory, Cleopatra was able to rally support from those who were loyal to him and solidify her position as the rightful heir to the throne. This act also highlights Cleopatra's intelligence and understanding of the nuances of power. She knew that by changing her name, she could manipulate public perception of her rule and gain the upper hand in her struggle for power. This image was further cemented in popular culture by plays like Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra and films like those starring Elizabeth Taylor. As the conflict between Rome's leading figures intensified, Cleopatra found herself caught in the middle and had to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics to protect her kingdom's interests. Despite the challenges she faced, Cleopatra demonstrated remarkable skill and diplomacy in managing this crisis. She was able to forge alliances with key players in the Roman conflict, ultimately securing favorable outcomes for Egypt. Her ability to navigate such a volatile situation with finesse showcased her intelligence, strategic thinking, and courage. Through her actions, Cleopatra not only protected her kingdom, but also established herself as a capable and savvy ruler. Her reputation as a shrewd leader grew, setting the stage for the events that would make her a legend. The Ptolemies were a Greek dynasty that ruled over Egypt after the death of Alexander the Great. Cleopatra was the daughter of King Ptolemy XII, and his sister wife Cleopatra V. From a young age, Cleopatra received a comprehensive education, becoming fluent in multiple languages, including Egyptian, and was well versed in literature, mathematics, science, and philosophy. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Cleopatra did not fit the stereotype of the pampered and naive Egyptian queen. Instead, she was a woman of substance who understood the importance of knowledge and its power. But the truth of Cleopatra's story is far more complex and fascinating than the simplistic portrayal of a mere seductress. In reality, Cleopatra was a shrewd politician, a brilliant strategist, and a cunning diplomat. She understood the power of image and used it to her advantage. Her decision to align herself with Caesar and then Mark Antony, while it may seem like a product of her sexual nature, was actually a pragmatic choice aimed at securing the future of her kingdom. When you look at her story through this lens, it becomes clear that Cleopatra was not just a seductress, but a remarkable leader in her own right. So let us start our journey to uncover the truth about Cleopatra and see why she deserves to be remembered for so much more than just her romantic entanglements. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC in the city of Alexandria, which at that time was the capital of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. At the age of 14, Cleopatra was married to her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, as was the custom in the Ptolemaic dynasty. One of Cleopatra's first acts as the sole ruler of Egypt was to change her name to Cleopatra Philippata, meaning Cleopatra, the lover of her father. However, Cleopatra's efforts to secure her kingdom were soon put to the test when Rome, a major trading partner of Egypt, descended into civil war. The year is 48 BC, and the city is Rome. Meanwhile, word of Pompey's arrival in Egypt reaches Julius Caesar, who sees it as a threat to his own ambitions. When Pompey arrived in Egypt, he did not realize that he was entering a carefully laid trap set by Cleopatra. The tension between Caesar and Pompey reached a boiling point. When Caesar learned of Pompey's presence in the city, Pompey, however, realized that he was being set up and fled to the coast, where he hoped to escape to Greece and regroup. But their relationship was not without its challenges. When Caesar was assassinated by a group of senators led by Marcus Junius Brutus, Cleopatra was devastated. Now, shortly after Caesar's assassination, a new player enters the scene, Mark Antony, a powerful member of the Second Triumvirate, alongside Octavian and Lepidus. As Cleopatra's relationship with Antony deepened, she bore him twin sons, Cleopatra Selene and Ptolemy Philip. Cleopatra and Antony's combined fleet and army were defeated by Octavian's forces at the Battle of Actium in 32 BC. Octavian, who would later become the first emperor of Rome, Augustus, was left in control of Egypt and the rest of the Mediterranean world. If you want to learn more about ancient Egypt, stay tuned. Thank you for watching. The last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, Cleopatra VII, often referred to simply as Cleopatra, was a powerful woman who fought hard for her throne. Born in 69 BC, Cleopatra became queen at the age of 14, ruling alongside her father, Ptolemy XII. But it wasn't long before she found herself at odds with him, and by the time she turned 18, she was forced to flee Egypt. It was then that Cleopatra began plotting her revenge and eventually took the throne for herself. However, even after becoming the sole ruler of Egypt, she had to deal with opposition from within her own family. As mentioned earlier, she was able to form a close relationship with Rome, which helped her to maintain her power in Egypt. This was largely due to her ability to speak the language and understand the culture of the Romans, which allowed her to connect with them on a deeper level. Additionally, she was able to offer Rome valuable things such as grain and gold, which helped to strengthen their relationship. She had control over the scribes and record keepers in her kingdom, and they were tasked with writing down and disseminating information about her rule. By controlling who had access to information about her, she was able to shape the public's perception of her. This created a sense of ownership and responsibility in those who served her, which made them more likely to be fiercely loyal. Despite the challenges she faced, she was able to carve out a place for herself in history as one of the most powerful and influential rulers of her time. If you did enjoy the video, please leave us a like and subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay curious. Her ability to speak multiple languages, coupled with her knowledge of various subjects, made her a formidable ruler and a respected member of the political elite. Moreover, her skills as a diplomat and strategist helped her to navigate the treacherous waters of politics and secure her position of power. By controlling the narrative about herself and shaping how people viewed her, she was able to maintain her power and influence over her subjects. Additionally, Cleopatra's ability to connect with people on a personal level and inspire loyalty and devotion in them was a key factor in her success. Finally, Cleopatra understood the importance of tradition, and she used this to her advantage. She was well versed in Egyptian religion and customs, and she made sure to uphold them in her own court. This created a sense of continuity and stability for the Egyptian people and made them more receptive to her rule. Overall, Cleopatra's ability to inspire loyalty and devotion in others was a key factor in her success as a ruler. By being a generous and independent leader who valued tradition, she was able to create a sense of community and belonging among her subjects, which made them more likely to be loyal and devoted to her cause. For example, she would have had scribes write down accounts of her victories and distribute them throughout her kingdom to inspire fear and respect among her enemies. Additionally, she may have had some scribes write down false or misleading information about her rivals in order to discredit them and weaken their support. Overall, Cleopatra's ability to use propaganda to her advantage was a key factor in her success as a ruler. By controlling the narrative about herself and shaping how people viewed her, she was able to maintain her power and influence over her subjects. Furthermore, Cleopatra understood the importance of using her feminine wiles to her advantage. Cleopatra was a charismatic leader who was able to connect with her people on a personal level. She was known for her generosity, and she lavished gifts upon her followers and supporters. Additionally, she was a strong and independent woman who defied the odds, and many people admired her for it. This loyalty and devotion were not limited to the general population. Even Cleopatra's enemies were often impressed by her strength and determination. For example, Octavian, who eventually defeated Cleopatra, was said to have been awestruck by her when he first saw her. He reportedly entered her court expecting to find a weak and helpless woman, but instead was met with a confident and powerful ruler. She was known for her beauty, and she used it to charm and manipulate those around her. For instance, she famously lay at the feet of Julius Caesar in order to gain his favor. By forming strong alliances with powerful people like Caesar and Antony, Cleopatra was able to secure her own power and protect Egypt's interests. Nevertheless, she managed to not only secure her power, but also expand Egypt's influence throughout the Mediterranean. She was also able to forge strategic partnerships with other groups and individuals. From a young age, Cleopatra was aware of the power of image, and she used it to create a persona that was both feared and respected by her enemies and admirers alike. She understood that controlling the narrative about herself was crucial to maintaining her power and influence. One way she did this was by commissioning works of art and literature that depicted her in a positive light. For example, she commissioned statues and coins that showed her as a goddess and distributed them throughout her kingdom. Additionally, she employed poets and historians to write stories about her that glorified her deeds and accomplishments. By controlling the narrative about herself, Cleopatra was able to shape how people viewed her and her rule. She was able to project an image of herself as a benevolent and powerful ruler who was destined to lead Egypt to greatness. For example, she formed an alliance with the Syrian king, which helped her to secure her northern border. Additionally, she was able to win over the hearts and minds of the Egyptian people by building temples and monuments and providing them with food and other necessities. Overall, Cleopatra's ability to build strong alliances was a key factor in her success as a ruler. By connecting with people from different cultures and backgrounds, she was able to create a powerful network that supported her rule and protected Egypt's interests. Although Cleopatra is remembered as a shrewd politician and powerful ruler, she has also been portrayed as a seductress who used her beauty to manipulate men into doing her bidding. But what really made Cleopatra so powerful? What were her secrets? She was a highly educated woman who spoke several languages and was well versed in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. This knowledge helped her to make sound decisions as a ruler and also gave her an edge over her male counterparts. For example, when Julius Caesar came to Egypt, he was impressed by Cleopatra's intelligence and wit. She was able to hold her own in conversations with him about various topics, and he was enamored by her. Similarly, Mark Antony, who was one of Rome's most powerful men, was also captivated by Cleopatra's intelligence and charm. These relationships were not just based on physical attraction, but also on mutual respect and admiration. In this video, we will explore the secrets of Cleopatra, the woman behind the power struggle. So stay tuned until the end to find out more, and was able to forge alliances with powerful people in order to further her own interests. For instance, she formed a close relationship with Rome, which helped her to secure her power in Egypt. Additionally, she was a shrewd negotiator and was able to get what she wanted out of the people she dealt with. For example, when she met with Octavian, who later became the Emperor Augustus, she was able to negotiate a settlement that allowed her to keep her throne. Overall, Cleopatra's intelligence was one of the key factors that contributed to her power and success. Her ability to speak multiple languages, coupled with her knowledge of various subjects, made her a formidable ruler and a respected member of the political elite. Moreover, her skills as a diplomat and strategist helped her to navigate the treacherous waters of politics and secure her position of power. One of Cleopatra's most well-known secrets was her intelligence. Cleopatra was also a skilled diplomat and strategist. She knew how to play the game of politics. Another one of Cleopatra's secrets was her ability to build strong alliances. However, Cleopatra's ability to build alliances was not limited to the Egyptians and the Romans. A third secret that contributed to Cleopatra's power was her ability to use propaganda to her advantage. Moreover, Cleopatra understood the importance of controlling the media, and she used this to her advantage. Finally, another secret that contributed to Cleopatra's power was her ability to inspire loyalty and devotion in others. Furthermore, Cleopatra was able to inspire loyalty in her advisors and courtiers by giving them important roles in her court and allowing them to participate in the decision-making process. In conclusion, Cleopatra's story is a testament to the power of intelligence, diplomacy, strategy, and self-promotion. Thank you for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed learning more about the secrets of Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. Cleopatra VII, Cleopatra, Queen of the Nile, one of history's most renowned rulers, and perhaps its most beautiful woman. She is also famously known for being the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, and the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt. She was the daughter of King Ptolemy XII and his sister, Cleopatra Cleopatra. While Cleopatra was only ever spoken of with reverence throughout history, her father was not well liked by the people of Egypt. In fact, they did so violently. Their divorce was messy and resulted in civil war. Cleopatra, Queen of Syria, was initially very welcoming to her, but eventually turned on her and ordered her to marry her son, King Tigranes II, while still claiming that she would remain Queen of Egypt. When this failed, Cleopatra declared war on Cleopatra and sent her army to invade Egypt. They would later return to Egypt, where they stayed for nearly a year until Caesar was forced to leave to put down a rebellion in Rome. This was especially true of Caesar's adopted son and heir Octavian, who was now furious with Cleopatra and her son. The Roman civil war was back on, and Cleopatra and Caesarion would need allies to survive. War was once again declared, and the resulting conflict would come to be known as the Battle of Actium. It is said that during the siege, Cleopatra and Mark Antony committed suicide rather than surrender to their enemies. Octavian, who would later become known as Augustus, was the first emperor of Rome and the founder of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, which ruled over Rome for the next 2 centuries. Augustus also founded the city of Alexandria in Egypt, which would become the capital of the Roman province. The eye of Cleopatra is said to have been found in the stomach of a fish and to have cost a king's ransom. Again, there is no evidence to support this story. Did you find this video informative or enjoyable? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. However, there is some debate over whether or not this is true. Her story has captured the imaginations of people for centuries and will continue to fascinate us for many more. She was celebrated as a symbol of Roman imperial power, along with her son Caesarion, who was proclaimed Caesar by his half-brother Octavian. Following the rule of Augustus, Egypt would remain a part of the Roman Empire until 395 AD, when it was conquered by the Arab armies of Caliph Omar. According to the historian Plutarch, Cleopatra took her own life by allowing an asp, a venomous snake native to Egypt, to bite her as she lay in her lover's arms. Over the years, legends have sprung up about her beauty, intelligence, and charm. Perhaps the most enduring of these is the story of how she charmed a pearl from the sea to win a bet against the wealthy Roman general Pompey. Historians have debated for centuries whether or not this story is true. However, there is no evidence to support it, and it was likely created to enhance Cleopatra's reputation as a legendary figure. Meanwhile, Mark Antony used a sword given to him by Caesar to take his own life. According to another account, however, Cleopatra merely faked her death by allowing an asp to crawl across her arm. Then when her servants arrived to find her seemingly dead, she allowed them to take her body away. With Antony dead, she then left the city with a small band of loyalists, never to be seen again. Mark Antony and Cleopatra's navies fought against the fleets of Octavian and his ally despite having the largest fleet ever assembled by an Egyptian navy. The Egyptian forces were defeated. This led to Antony and Cleopatra's armies being defeated on land and forced to retreat to Alexandria. Before leaving, he gave Cleopatra a tour of the treasures that he planned to bring back for her, including the famous pearl that would later become known as the Eye of Cleopatra. Caesar was soon killed by a group of senators, but not before naming Cleopatra and her son Caesarion as his heirs. Unfortunately for Iotapa, her forces were defeated near the Syrian border. Not long after, Cleopatra reclaimed the throne of Egypt and punished those who had supported her sister during the civil war. At the time, Mark Antony was married to Octavian's sister Octavia, but it didn't take long for him to fall in love with Cleopatra. The two became lovers, and Cleopatra bore Antony several children, including twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra VII. Antony began lavishing gifts upon Cleopatra and her children, including the famous crown jewels of the last pharaohs, which are now held by the British Museum. It was eventually won by Cleopatra, who managed to have her ex-husband put to death and leaving her the sole ruler of Egypt. Julius Caesar had recently assassinated Pompey the Great, defeating his forces and establishing himself as the dictator of the Roman Empire. After hearing of Caesar's victories, Cleopatra decided that she needed to make an ally of the new Roman dictator. The problem was that getting to Rome would be difficult since the seas were controlled by pirates. So instead, Caesar was invited to Egypt, where Cleopatra would meet him. However, she would not reign alone for long. Upon his arrival in Egypt, Caesar found himself locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse with Cleopatra. She wanted to see him, but he refused to go to her unless she agreed to meet him in person without any guards or weapons present. Cleopatra, however, was suspicious and believed that Caesar only wanted to capture her and take the throne of Egypt for himself. So she hid inside a carpet and snuck into his court. When Caesar realized that she was there, he allowed her to approach him. They fell in love, and Cleopatra gave birth to Caesar. He was unpopular because he made himself virtually blind and deaf after having cataract surgery performed on him. This was, of course, an unsuccessful operation, leaving him entirely dependent on Cleopatra and her mother. Once Cleopatra and her younger sister, Arsinoe IV, came of age, their father arranged for them to marry his brother, Ptolemy XIII, making both women queens. But this was against Cleopatra's wishes. She had been promised to her father's ally, King Mithridates VI of Pontus, when she was just a child. Her story has been romanticized by countless works of fiction, and her life story remains one of the most popular subjects in modern Egyptology. But how much of what we know about her is actually true? Welcome to my channel. And today, let's find out from ruler to legend, the mythos of Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC in the city of Alexandria. When Cleopatra was 14 years old, Ptolemy XII died, supposedly at the hands of Cleopatra and her mother, who were both fed up with him and his self-imposed isolation. With him dead, Cleopatra's father, her mother, and her younger sister were all gone. So she and her new husband Ptolemy XIII became the rulers of Egypt together. As a result of her father's botched surgery, it was said that Cleopatra knew multiple languages, including Egyptian, which was rare among rulers of the time, as well as several others from around the Mediterranean, such as Greek, Hebrew, and even some Latin. It was also said that she had been tutored by the famous philosopher and mathematician Euclid, though there are conflicting accounts over whether or not this is true. The union between Cleopatra and Ptolemy lasted less than 2 years before the couple got fed up with each other and decided to part ways. After killing Ptolemy XIII, Cleopatra's younger sister, Arsinoe IV, fled to the kingdom of Syria, where she lived under the protection of her father's former ally, Queen I. During this time, Rome was embroiled in civil war of its own. There are many different stories about how Cleopatra met Caesar, but the tale most commonly told goes as follows. Shortly after the birth of her son, Cleopatra and Caesar set sail for Athens, where they spent the summer together. As you might expect, this caused quite a stir among the Roman Senate, who were appalled by Caesar's decision to name Cleopatra and her illegitimate son Caesarion as his heirs. Mark Antony was the triumvir of the eastern provinces of the Roman Empire and the perfect candidate to help Cleopatra and Caesarion keep their claim to Rome. In 43 BC, Mark Antony declared Cleopatra and her children his heirs, much to the anger of his former ally Octavian. It was at this point that Octavian laid siege to the city. Following the fall of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, Octavian invaded Egypt and annexed it as a province of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra was deified after her death, becoming the goddess Isis, in the cult of the Lady of the Augustan Age. Much of what we know about Cleopatra comes from the writings of Roman historians, many of whom were biased against her. Another legend is that Cleopatra owned the most beautiful and precious jewels in the ancient world, including the Eye of Cleopatra, a massive pearl that was said to have been the size of a pigeon's egg. Despite all of the legends and myths surrounding her, Cleopatra was a real historical figure who played an important role in the history of Egypt and the Roman Empire. Tell me, friends, what do you think about the story of Cleopatra? Cleopatra was easily one of the most influential women in ancient history, even though she is remembered by many mostly for her affair with Roman general Mark Antony and their untimely deaths. The last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt had a knack for choosing powerful lovers, but it wasn't just about passion for Cleopatra. When Cleopatra met Roman general Pompey the Great, he was at the height of his career. We know Cleopatra had a son with Julius Caesar named Caesar, but how exactly did they meet? According to Plutarch, Caesar came to Alexandria in 48 BCE after defeating Pompey in battle. In hindsight, it should have been obvious to Cleopatra that she wasn't going to get along with Octavian, who was the grandnephew and adopted son of Julius Caesar. If Cleopatra had a type, it was powerful Roman men with a taste for excess, and nowhere was this more evident than in her relationship with Mark Antony, one of the three members of the second Cleopatra and Mark Antony's affair is legendary, even though we don't have much documentation about it. What we do know is that Antony was already married to Octavia, the sister of Augustus, and the couple had 2 children together. But that didn't stop him from embarking on a passionate affair with Cleopatra, even though their romance was purely physical. Cleopatra was smart enough to understand that Antony wasn't getting a divorce, so she had her court painter, Pythias, immortalize their romance on canvas, portraying them as the Egyptian gods Osiris and Isis. Soon, Cleopatra's presence loomed large in Antony's life. Not only did they have a son together named Caesar, but she accompanied him on official business, acting as his advisor and essentially running Egypt while he gallivanted around Rome. But Antony's close relationship with Cleopatra angered his wife, Octavia, who felt neglected and unwanted, and he sent her away after she miscarried their 3rd child. This caused a rift between Antony and his fellow triumvirs, Octavian and Lepidus, and the two went to war. Meanwhile, Cleopatra remained in Alexandria with her son Caesar and her loyal general While Antony was defeated by Octavian at the Battle of Actium, Cleopatra managed to escape and regroup. But after Antony was captured, Cleopatra received word that he had taken his own life. When news reached her that her lover was dead, Cleopatra had a venomous snake bite her, bringing her own life to an end. You see, Octavian had a vested interest in ensuring that Caesar's bloodline continued, since he himself was the last male descendant of Caesar's family. Even worse for Cleopatra, Octavian viewed her son Caesarion as a threat to his own claim on the Roman throne and the Egyptian throne. So shortly after his victory over Cleopatra's forces at the Battle of Actium in 32 BC, Octavian invaded Egypt and forced her to commit suicide. But let's rewind a bit. Let's go back to the beginning of the relationship between Octavian and Cleopatra. While Octavian was technically the one who controlled Egypt, it was actually Cleopatra who had the upper hand. She chose to ignore the pleas of her advisors to flee to India, knowing that Octavian would pursue her there. Instead, she decided to play hardball. Refusing to cooperate with Octavian, Cleopatra basically sat on her hands and waited for the young emperor to make the first move, and he did. In 30 BCE, Octavian invaded Egypt and quickly made progress against Cleopatra's forces, who were ill-equipped and poorly trained. At the Battle of Actium, Octavian's navy defeated Cleopatra's fleet, and he entered Alexandria in triumph. Now, it's important to point out that Octavian, later known as Augustus, was known for being very cautious, slow to trust and adept at turning public opinion against his enemies. Cleopatra, on the other hand, was reckless, trusting and impulsive. While this may have worked for her in dealing with her brother, and perhaps some of her other lovers, It was ultimately her undoing against Octavian. He was able to paint Cleopatra as an Egyptian tyrant ruling over Roman citizens and taking advantage of Rome's economic interests in the region. By contrast, he portrayed himself as a champion of Rome coming to rescue its people from the clutches of a foreign queen. In the end, Cleopatra fell for the classic trick of disarming her enemies with beauty, sending him letters begging for her life, promising to surrender if he spared her. But Octavian wasn't interested in her offers. He executed her and her lover, Mark Antony, in 30 BCE. Her son Caesarion was executed 2 years later. Augustus went on to rule over the largest empire the world had ever seen, and Egypt became a province of Rome. The two had actually met before, when Cleopatra was only 14 years old, visiting Rome with her father. But if their first meeting had any romantic undertones, it must have been strictly platonic. Caesar, on the other hand, was an adult and ready to settle down. In fact, he'd recently wed Calpurnia, a young noblewoman from a prominent Roman family. But Caesar's marriage was childless, and he desperately needed an heir. Enter Cleopatra, an alluring queen in need of Roman backing to solidify her power in Egypt. But Caesar fell hard for Cleopatra and took her to Rome with him. However, his wife Calpurnia despised Cleopatra and refused to accept her in their home. So the Egyptian queen had to stay in Caesar's palace across the Tiber River. While Caesar's relationship with Cleopatra might seem to have mirrored the affair he had with the Egyptian queen, it differed in some key ways. For one, Caesar was still married to Calpurnia, although they were often separated. Also, the relationship between Caesar and Cleopatra seems to have been more equal than his relationship with Antony, who became a mere pawn in Cleopatra's schemes. It seemed the feeling was mutual, as Caesar was smitten with Cleopatra, referring to her as the new Isis, and declaring her to be the embodiment of Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of beauty. Together, Caesar and Cleopatra had a son, Caesarion, whom Caesar declared a legitimate member of the Julian clan and groomed for potential greatness. They also made plans to marry, once Caesar was granted a divorce from Calpurnia. Unfortunately, Caesar was assassinated before either could happen, but Cleopatra held on to Caesar's memory, idolizing him, and perhaps waiting for his eventual heir, Octavian, to follow in his footsteps, and considered one of Rome's most successful generals. Having defeated the rebellious Roman province of the Mithridates, the sixth in the first myth, Cleopatra had a brother named Ptolemy XIII. And no, he wasn't a fan of the number 13. He hated it so much, in fact, that he changed the name of his newborn daughter to Isa, presumably because the name Cleopatra was associated with her mother, whom Ptolemy loathed. Ptolemy XIII's hatred for Cleopatra was well known, and he constantly kept her out of his sight, never allowing her to leave her quarters without an armed escort. To make matters worse, he developed a serious case of paranoia, believing that Cleopatra was secretly plotting against him. To protect herself, Cleopatra spent much of her time laying low in her quarters, in the company of one of her few confidants, the poet and playwright. But despite the constant fear and isolation, Cleopatra found time to have a secret romance with one of her brother's counselors, a man named Soon Pothinus became the target of Ptolemy's paranoia, and the king ordered him executed. This enraged Cleopatra, who in turn plotted to kill her brother. Along with her lover, Pothinus, she invited Ptolemy over for dinner, where she slipped poison into his wine. Then, while the king was incapacitated and dying, she stabbed him to death. With her brother dead, Cleopatra was finally able to ascend to the throne of Egypt alongside her 12-year-old sister, Arsinoe IV. But their reign wouldn't last long. Soon, Rome would intervene, placing Cleopatra's 12-year-old son Caesarion on the throne as puppet ruler, while turning control of the government over to a triumvir named Octavius, who would later become Emperor Augustus. As for Arsinoe IV, Cleopatra had her killed on the orders of Rome. But more on that next. But Pompey was also persona non grata in Egypt. His father, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, had been murdered by order of King Ptolemy XII, who had then taken over the Egyptian throne, which he shared with his sister Cleopatra, until his death in 51 BCE. So when Pompey arrived in Egypt in 48 BCE seeking passage to meet with Julius Caesar, he was actually there as an honored guest, kind of. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra wanted to make an entrance and impress him, so she had herself lowered into his audience chamber in a basket hidden inside a carpet. Was this a romantic tryst, or a chance for Cleopatra to butter up one of Rome's most powerful men and secure his favor? Well, we don't know. And that's the thing about Cleopatra's love life. We have very little documentation from people who actually lived during her lifetime. Most of what we know comes from Roman historians like Plutarch and Cassius Dio, who were writing centuries after Cleopatra's death, and whose works are tinged with heavy political bias. What we do know is that Cleopatra cultivated a positive relationship with Pompey, granting him safe passage through Egypt and helping him establish a naval base at the port city of Alexandria. But it didn't last long. After he left Egypt, Pompey's head was chopped off by order of Julius Caesar. But Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar would soon begin. Her strategy of marrying or forming alliances with some of the most powerful men of her age helped shape the future of not only Egypt, but the entire Mediterranean world. Let us take a look at 5 men Cleopatra slept with or married, and how those relationships affected history, starting with No. 5. Pompey the Great. Coming in at No. 4 is Julius Caesar. At No. 3, we have Ptolemy XIII. Coming in at No. 2 is Octavian, better known as Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. And finally, at No. 1, we have Mark Antony. Click here to watch one of these next videos and let us know in the comments section which queen you think was the greatest of all time. Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, has fascinated people for centuries with her intelligence, beauty, and tragic end. But what if I told you there's more to her story than meets the eye? Most people don't know that Cleopatra's father was not Egyptian, but rather a Greek Macedonian king named Ptolemy XII. He ruled over the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt after Alexander the Great conquered it. This is important because it shows that Cleopatra wasn't just an Egyptian queen, but a ruler of a kingdom that was part of the wider Mediterranean world. When Cleopatra came into power, she made a deliberate choice to cast herself in the role of the Egyptian goddess Isis, the wife of Osiris and mother of Horus. This is significant because it shows how deeply Egyptian culture was in her life and how she wanted to be seen by her people. Despite what many people believe, Cleopatra was not actually killed by the Romans when they invaded Egypt. In fact, she died around 30 BC, well before the Roman invasion. This is significant because it shows the reverence in which she was held by her people. They saw her as a kind of divine ruler who had brought prosperity to Egypt, and they wanted to continue to honor her even after she was gone. This is partly due to Roman propaganda which sought to discredit her by portraying her as a temptress who had led Antony astray. However, this portrayal is not entirely accurate, as Cleopatra was a shrewd politician and military strategist, as well as a great leader. While she may have used her beauty and wit to her advantage, it was ultimately her intelligence and skills that made her such a formidable ruler. This is evident in the many temples and monuments that were dedicated to her throughout Egypt, as well as the coins and other artifacts that were produced in her honor. Being deified was a great honor in ancient Egypt, and it shows that Cleopatra was truly seen as a great pharaoh by her people. This is important because it shows that the Romans did not play a direct role in her death. This is significant because it means that we still do know what happened to her body after she died. Did she rest in an eternal slumber, or was she lost to the sands of time? The mystery surrounding her final resting place only adds to the intrigue of her story and makes us wonder secrets her tomb might hold. The search for Cleopatra's tomb continues to this day, and perhaps one day we will find it and learn more about her final resting place. Rather, they arrived on the scene after she had already passed away. This is also evidenced by the accounts of Roman historians who describe Cleopatra's death in detail, but do not mention the Romans playing any part in it. She was a brilliant leader, a shrewd politician, a skilled military strategist, and a devotee of Egyptian culture. Her story is one of ambition, determination, and tragedy, and her legacy continues to fascinate us today. If you want to learn more about Cleopatra, we recommend checking out our channel where we have a wealth of information on this enigmatic queen. Thanks for watching. The name Isis was a powerful symbol of female divinity in ancient Egypt, and Cleopatra knew that by taking on this name, she would be seen as a kind of goddess to her subjects. This is also evident in her coinage, which features her face alongside that of Isis. By identifying herself with Isis, Cleopatra was able to legitimize her rule and connect herself to the ancient traditions of Egypt. As such, she was well-traveled and well-educated, speaking a number of languages, including Egyptian, Greek and Latin. This is evident in the few surviving portraits of her that show her wearing the traditional Egyptian dress of a long white gown and a blue or green headdress. This was another way that she identified herself with the Egyptian people and showed her commitment to their culture. According to Roman sources, she took her own life by allowing an asp, a type of venomous snake, to bite her. However, there is no Egyptian evidence to support this account, and it may have been a Roman propaganda to discredit her. Another theory suggests that she died of natural causes, perhaps from a disease or old age, as she was in her early 30s when she died. Some scholars believe that she was pregnant at the time of her death, which could have contributed to her demise. Ultimately, without hard evidence, it's impossible to say for sure how Cleopatra died. It also helped to create an image of her as a mysterious and exotic queen, which only added to her allure. This also means that she wasn't as exotic or mysterious as some people might think. She was a product of her time and place, just like any other ruler. From her unusual upbringing to her vast intellect, here are 10 things you didn't know about Cleopatra. 2. Her mother was Cleopatra VII, as historians may. They co-you and seem to agree whether Cleopatra was the daughter of Ptolemy the 12th and Cleopatra V or Cleopatra VI and Ptolemy the 12th. All we know for sure is that her mother was Cleopatra, which makes this queen Cleopatra's great-grandmother. Yes, the famous queen had 2 great-grandmothers named Cleopatra. To make matters even more confusing, her mother was likely the sister of her father, making them uncle and niece. But this was common practice in the royal family to keep their power within the family, so no one really bats an eyelid. No. 1. Her father was an anti-Greek Macedonian king, contrary to popular belief. Cleopatra did not speak Egyptian, but rather Koine Greek. However, she was fluent in the Egyptian language, which was very rare among non-Egyptians at the time. She learned it from her mother, who was Egyptian. This is significant because it shows that Cleopatra was very interested in Egyptian culture and history. It also helped her to connect with her subjects on a deeper level and to present herself as a true Egyptian queen. Learning the language would have been incredibly difficult as it's written in hieroglyphs, which were not used in any other contemporary civilization. There was no alphabet to learn, no grammar books, and she would have needed a tutor to teach her the language. No, she grew up speaking Egyptian. No. 4. She chose to be called the new Isis. No. 5. She dressed like an Egyptian woman. In addition to her choice of name, Cleopatra also dressed like an Egyptian woman when she appeared in public. Number 6. She died before the Roman invasion of Egypt. 7. Her cause of death is uncertain. The circumstances surrounding Cleopatra's death are shrouded in mystery, and there is no definitive answer as to how she died. No. 8. She was deified after her death. Following Cleopatra's death, she was deified by the Egyptians, meaning that she was worshipped as a goddess. 9. Her tomb has never been found. Despite extensive searches, Cleopatra's tomb has never been found. 10. She is often portrayed as a seductress. Cleopatra is often portrayed as a beautiful and seductive woman who used her charms to manipulate men into doing her bidding. As we've seen, Cleopatra was a complex and fascinating woman who was much more than just a beautiful face. The story of Cleopatra is one that most of us are familiar with, an Egyptian queen who lived thousands of years ago, known for her beauty and intelligence, and for choosing a certain famous Roman dude to be her lover. But what if I told you there was more to her story than meets the eye? Hi everyone, welcome to this house. Today we are exploring the stories behind some of history's most infamous figures. Join me as we uncover the truth about one of history's most notorious rulers in unmasking Cleopatra, the untold stories of Egypt's last pharaoh. Before we begin, please make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode. Let's get into it. Born in 69 BC, Cleopatra was born in Alexandria, Egypt, the largest city in the Mediterranean world, and a cultural melting pot of the ancient world. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Cleopatra did not have an Egyptian father. Her father was actually Ptolemy the 12th, who was Greek Macedonian descent. Her mother, Cleopatra V, was also Greek, but of Syrian origin. Despite this, however, Cleopatra would have been familiar with Egyptian culture, as the royal family spoke the Egyptian language and employed Egyptians in senior positions within the government. She may have even known hieroglyphics, although no surviving evidence confirms this. Despite being born into royalty, Cleopatra's childhood was anything but ordinary. While she had a loving mother, her father was extremely abusive, and at one point he even banished her mother from the palace. As such, when he died, Cleopatra's mother took control of the kingdom, ruling as regent for Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. As the two siblings grew up, they were educated together and expected to marry once they came of age, just as their parents had done. However, their mother's overprotectiveness of Cleopatra led the two siblings to grow resentful of her. In fact, it has been suggested that Cleopatra and her brother had plans to kill their mother. Tragedy struck, however, before they could act on their plan, as Cleopatra's mother died during a visit to Rome. With the mother out of the picture, Cleopatra and her brother's relationship became increasingly fraught with tension, and eventually the two decided to take the throne as co-rulers. Even though they were only 14 and 10 years old respectively, they were likely influenced by their mother's Syrian advisors to do this. However, there is little evidence that either sibling was capable of making sound decisions at this young age. In fact, shortly after taking the throne, Ptolemy XIII murdered 3 of his mother's advisors, believing them to be responsible for her death. It didn't help that he had a reputation for being cruel and violent. It has been said that he chained women to chariots, like horses, and whipped them as they pulled him around. He also hosted feasts, inviting 8 men of only one type, bald, short or fat. He reportedly kept prostitutes for his amusement and enjoyed throwing gold coins from a tower, gleefully watching as the common folk fought over the riches. It's not hard to see why the citizens of Alexandria hated him, and given Cleopatra's involvement in his regime, they weren't fond of her either. Cleopatra knew she needed to do something to improve her public image. But it helped that she was strikingly beautiful and incredibly intelligent. The stories of her exotic beauty have been passed down through the ages, and it's hard to imagine Cleopatra without her trademark dark, luscious locks and smoldering gaze. However, she wasn't just a pretty face. Cleopatra was a true Renaissance woman, fluent in 9 languages. She was a skilled diplomat and a shrewd politician. Her intellect was matched only by her ambition. In order to restore her reputation, Cleopatra began visiting the temples in person, participating in religious festivals, building new temples, and commissioning works of art, depicting herself as a living goddess. She also solidified her power by marrying her brother, officially establishing her divinity and cementing her rule over Egypt. Soon, rumors of her divine status reached the ears of Julius Caesar, who would soon invade Egypt. So Cleopatra used her knowledge of her lover's impending arrival to her advantage, traveling down the Nile to greet him with a flotilla of ships, each carrying soldiers ready to defend her claim to the throne. Whether it was love at first sight is up for debate, but the two would quickly become lovers, and Cleopatra bore Caesar a son whom she claimed was the reincarnation of the god Horus. This claim was later used to support her argument that she was a descendant of the Egyptian pharaohs and rightful ruler of Egypt. Unfortunately, Caesar was assassinated in Rome shortly after learning of Cleopatra's supposed divinity and her son's existence. Many believe that Cleopatra's brother orchestrated the murder by convincing Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, that Cleopatra had plans to assassinate her husband. Now, alone again, Cleopatra needed a new ally, and she set her sights on the most powerful man in Rome, Mark Antony. Unlike Caesar, Antony was already married, but this didn't stop the two from becoming lovers. In fact, Antony would eventually leave his wife to be with Cleopatra. During their time together, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, and Antony declared them king and queen of Syria. A short while later, Cleopatra also gave birth to a son named Ptolemy, but she concealed his parentage, claiming instead that he was the child of Antony lavished gifts upon Cleopatra, including the famed pearl that would become known as the Eye of Cleopatra. Historians say that it weighed about 60 carats and was considered one of the world's largest pearls at the time. He also gave her the city of Alexandria Isora, which she promptly renamed as. However, the people of Rome were less than impressed with Antony's treatment of Cleopatra and his lavish gifts to her. Rumors spread throughout the empire that she was nothing but a foreign seductress who had cast a spell on the great general, and it didn't help that she cultivated the image of a goddess while living in unimaginable luxury. Far from the struggles of the average Roman citizen, Antony's friends and colleagues plotted against him and eventually persuaded him to divorce his wife and marry Octavia, the daughter of Rome's first emperor, Augustus. In exchange, Octavia was forced to divorce her husband and marry Antony. Cleopatra refused to accept this slight. However, and did everything in her power to destroy Octavia's reputation. Not only did Cleopatra spread rumors that Octavia was infertile, but she also imprisoned her in a villa. She then paraded around Rome with Antony, flaunting her own fertility by wearing garments adorned with fertility symbols. Meanwhile, Antony's sister, Octavia, was busy spreading rumors of her own, telling anyone who would listen that Cleopatra was planning to poison Antony and usurp his position. When Antony finally realized what she was doing, he returned to Egypt with Cleopatra by his side. There, he gave her the rulership of all of Egypt and made her his queen. The two ruled together until Antony died in 32 BC. Cleopatra was now in grave danger, as Octavian wanted to conquer Egypt and add it to his growing empire. Knowing that she couldn't win a battle against the Roman army, Cleopatra poisoned herself rather than be captured. As her followers, including her sister, committed mass suicide, the city fell to Octavian, who renamed it to Alexandria. He honored his late grandmother, Julia, by naming his newly conquered land the province of Julia Augusta. Though Cleopatra's reign may have ended in tragedy, her legacy lives on. Whether she was a benevolent ruler or an evil queen depends largely on who you ask. If you ask her loyal followers, they will tell you that she was the reincarnation of the Egyptian goddess Isis, come to fulfill her destiny. If you ask her enemies, they'll tell you that she was nothing more than a power-hungry, money-grabbing monarch who cared little for the suffering of her people. But one thing is for sure, she was one of the most intelligent and savvy rulers of her time, a master manipulator who understood the power of propaganda and the importance of controlling the narrative. She was also incredibly ambitious, willing to do whatever it took to secure her legacy. In that way, she was truly the original Queen Bee. Thank you all for watching. Which untold story of Cleopatra did you find the most fascinating? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're there, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, so you never miss an exciting episode. See you next time. Cleopatra is regarded by many as the world's most beautiful woman. She was also renowned for her intelligence, charm, and seductive powers. Her tomb is yet to be found. Let's find out more about the world's most beautiful woman. But first, do you not forget to subscribe if you haven't already, so that you won't miss any new updates. Now let's begin. Cleopatra Selene, a great-great-great-granddaughter of Cleopatra, passed away in London at the age of 78. According to historical accounts, Cleopatra's appearance was more Mediterranean than Egyptian. This is supported by coins minted during her reign, which depict her with a Greek rather than an Egyptian note. Additionally, her name was pronounced Cleopatra and not Cleopatra, as the latter was a Roman interpretation. According to Roman historian Pliny the Younger, Cleopatra received a crocodile as a gift from the king of Arabia. She kept the crocodile as a pet and even trained it to recognize her and follow commands. Legend has it that the crocodile would join Cleopatra in her bath, and she would feed it figs, which the animal would catch with its tail. She is the last known living relative of Cleopatra, and her death marks the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Although Cleopatra had relationships with both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, who were both Roman leaders, she never traveled to Rome herself. Instead, she met Caesar in Greece and Antony in Egypt. Some historians estimate that Cleopatra was born around 69 BC, which means that she lived just 1950 years ago. During one of her visits to Rome, Cleopatra dressed as the Egyptian goddess Isis and rode in on a golden chariot drawn by elephants. This was part of her efforts to present herself as a divine ruler and connect with the Egyptian population in Rome. One of Cleopatra's most famous acts was her successful attempt to persuade Roman General Pompey to declare her and her sister co-regents of Egypt. She managed to convince him despite his initial opposition, showcasing her ability to influence powerful individuals. Their relationship appears to have been close and supportive, and the sisters worked together to advance their interests and protect their kingdom. A statue of Cleopatra located in a British museum was reportedly made from a meteorite that fell in the region of Aswan in Egypt. This adds a unique and mysterious element to the artifact, linking it to celestial events and possibly reflecting ancient beliefs about the divine origins of rulers. This is only 100 years earlier than the invention of the iPhone, and much closer to us than the estimated 4,550 years since the construction of the Great Pyramid. The Royal Library of Alexandria, located in Cleopatra's capital city, was one of the largest and most comprehensive libraries in the ancient world. Despite the lack of substantial ruins attributed to Cleopatra herself, She commissioned various building projects, including a temple dedicated to the goddess Hathor near the Philae Island. These projects demonstrate her commitment to preserving and promoting Egyptian culture and religion. By reading them, we can better understand the complexities of Cleopatra's character and appreciate her as more than just a symbol of beauty. If you did, please let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content. It was a center of scholarship and learning, and housed countless scrolls and books on a wide range of subjects. In addition to her diplomatic and seductive abilities, Cleopatra was also a capable military strategist and tactician. These coins, which featured images of both Cleopatra and various Egyptian deities, served as a tangible representation of her power and authority. She led her armies to victory against various enemies, including the kingdom of Nebat. Some of this propaganda took the form of coins depicting Cleopatra as a goddess, while others showed her in a negative light, such as one Roman coin that portrayed her as a dangerous seductress. Cleopatra's story has fascinated people for centuries, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and film. Her enduring popularity can be attributed to her iconic status as a beautiful and intelligent ruler who met a tragic end. She desired to be loved and cherished by her lover. This might seem trivial, but in the world of seduction, knowing how to laugh at the right moments can make all the difference. A good sense of humor is a very important quality in a potential partner, and Cleopatra knew this well. If someone could make her laugh, then they had already won half the battle in winning her over. Everyone who knew Cleopatra, from the famous Roman general Mark Antony to her own sister, agreed that she was the epitome of beauty. In fact, when Antony met her, he thought that the goddess of beauty had been put into a human body. The one thing that really made Cleopatra stand out was her knowledge of how to use her body language to affect other people. Even if she didn't have the most beautiful face or the perfect figure, she could win anyone over with her gestures. For instance, when she extended her arms wide, her wrists would hit the ground because she had such long fingers. When she walked, she moved like a cat and always seemed to know exactly what pose to strike to make a good impression. It's believed that the ancient Egyptian queen learned the art of seduction from her mother, Queen According to Roman historian Plutarch, Terminus was the most beautiful woman in Egypt, but it wasn't just her looks that made her attractive. Her behavior towards men was what made her truly irresistible. When she entered a room, all eyes were on her and people would lose their minds over her. Cleopatra inherited her mother's mesmerizing charisma and applied it to great effect throughout her life. According to the accounts of the Romans who captured her, even though Cleopatra was not conventionally beautiful, she had an unparalleled ability to charm anybody. One of Cleopatra's most endearing qualities was her infectious laughter, which often caught people off guard. Cleopatra was fully aware of her seductive powers and used them to her advantage whenever necessary. In the ancient world, the ability to maintain a composed and controlled demeanor while flirting was an essential skill for a successful seduction. The letters that were found offer us a window into Cleopatra's thoughts and feelings. The discovery of these letters has given us a unique insight into the mind and heart of one of history's most enigmatic figures. Cleopatra's story is a tragic one. Despite her many talents and accomplishments, she was ultimately betrayed by those she trusted and met a violent end. We have compiled a list of interesting facts about Cleopatra that will surely surprise you. Number 1. Cleopatra's last known surviving descendant died in 2021. No. 2. Cleopatra may not have looked Egyptian. Number 3. Cleopatra lived closer to the invention of the iPhone than the construction of the Great Pyramid. No. 4. Cleopatra was the first queen of Egypt to speak the Egyptian language. No. 5. Cleopatra had a pet crocodile named Iet. Number 6. Cleopatra was a member of the Ptolemaic Dynasty. Number 7. Cleopatra and Julius Caesar had a son together. Number 8. Cleopatra was fluent in several languages. In addition to her native Egyptian, Greek and Demotic, Cleopatra also spoke Hebrew, Syrian, Latin, and Akkadian. Number 9. Cleopatra never visited Rome. Number 10. Cleopatra was skilled in the art of persuasion. Number 11. Cleopatra was the subject of propaganda. Both supporters and detractors of Cleopatra produced propaganda to promote their agendas. Number 12. Cleopatra played the role of the goddess Isis. Number 13. Cleopatra's relationship with Rome was complicated. Number 14. Cleopatra was associated with the number 7. Several aspects of Cleopatra's life, such as the number of letters she sent to her lover. Number 15. Cleopatra was skilled in the art of war. Number 16. Cleopatra's sister was her. Cleopatra ruled Egypt alongside her sister, either as co-regent or sole ruler. Number 17. Cleopatra's statue was made from a meteorite. Number 18. Cleopatra's library was world-renowned. Number 19. Cleopatra issued her own currency. Cleopatra's image and name appeared on coins minted during her reign, reflecting her status as the ruler of Egypt. Number 20. Cleopatra had a taste for luxury. Cleopatra was known for her lavish lifestyle, which included owning a fleet of luxurious ships and enjoying expensive feasts and parties. Number 21. Cleopatra was responsible for building projects. Number 22. Cleopatra's story has endured through the ages. These letters give us a glimpse into the mind of a true icon. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. Did Cleopatra really love Julius Caesar? Cleopatra and Caesar are probably history's most famous couple. We know they had an affair and a son together, but how did it start? And was there true love involved? Let's find out in today's episode of Fake or Fact. Welcome to my channel, where we bring you the craziest and weirdest facts from human history. Some of our previous episodes include crazy facts about Genghis Khan, the worst presidents in US history and the most evil things the government has ever done. And today we will be answering the intriguing question, did Cleopatra really love Julius Caesar? In order to answer this question, we must first understand a little bit about Cleopatra. Cleopatra was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. She took the throne at 14 years old after her father, King Ptolemy XII, died. Cleopatra was the first woman to rule the Egyptian kingdom since the death of Queen Elizabeth I of England in 1603. So she was a very young queen, taking on a very powerful role. Cleopatra did unspeak a word of Egyptian, and she had never lived in Egypt before she took the throne. She was actually born in the Macedonian city of Alexandria, which was located near the Nile River Delta. Cleopatra was fluent in 9 different languages, including Egyptian, and she was also very educated, being well versed in mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and many other topics. During her reign, Cleopatra made every effort to reassert the authority of the pharaohs over Egypt. She rebuilt temples and monuments, encouraged trade, and implemented new agricultural technologies that increased productivity along the Nile River. Cleopatra also successfully defended her nation against invaders such as the Syrian king, Antiochus the Great, and she negotiated a peace treaty with Rome that brought stability to the region. However, because of her progressive ideas and reforms, Cleopatra made some enemies within her own court. In fact, her own brother and husband, King Ptolemy XIII, was plotting against her so that he could seize power for himself. Enter Julius Caesar. Caesar was a Roman general and statesman who played a critical role in the events that led to the demise of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. He is considered one of the most influential and significant figures in ancient history, known for his military campaigns, political reforms, and his contributions to Roman culture and literature. Cleopatra had heard about Julius Caesar, not only because he was conquering many lands around the Mediterranean, but also because he was rumored to be quite the ladies' man. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra became infatuated with Julius Caesar even before meeting him. She had heard about his deeds and wanted to meet him, but Caesar didn't know anything about Cleopatra. When he arrived in Alexandria in 48 BC, he was greeted by King Ptolemy and Queen Cleopatra, though Plutarch says that Cleopatra didn't attend the banquet that Caesar held. She likely met him at this gathering, but Caesar still had no idea who she was. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra was determined to win Caesar over, but she knew that he would never accept her if she went to him directly. So she devised a plan to get into Caesar's presence. She had herself smuggled into his palace inside a carpet. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apparently, Cleopatra's head was sticking out of the carpet, as Caesar's men carried it into his palace. Once she was in front of him, Cleopatra introduced herself and told him that she was the new queen of Egypt, but Caesar still wasn't convinced. He ordered his men to cut open the carpet to make sure that she was unhiding anyone else underneath. After confirming that she was alone, Caesar finally believed that Cleopatra was truly the queen of Egypt. The two rulers hit it off immediately. Caesar was taken aback by Cleopatra's intelligence, wit, and charm. Meanwhile, Cleopatra couldn't help but be impressed by Caesar's confidence, power, and charisma. The two spent long hours talking together, discussing philosophy, politics, and poetry. They also enjoyed attending cultural events together, such as plays, concerts, and feasts. Their mutual respect and admiration grew into something more, and soon they were spending every moment they could together. Their relationship was passionate and intense, and they were deeply in love with each other. Caesar was completely enamored with Cleopatra, and he showered her with expensive gifts, including a priceless pearl necklace called the Eye of Ra. Cleopatra was equally devoted to Caesar, and she bore him a son named who was born in 47 BC. But the relationship between these two lovers wasn't without its challenges. There was a huge difference in their cultures and backgrounds, and they often clashed over issues related to politics and power. Caesar was a Roman conqueror and leader, while Cleopatra was an Egyptian queen trying to maintain her country's independence. Additionally, both of them had their own political enemies, who were trying to sabotage their relationship in order to gain power for themselves. Despite these obstacles, though Cleopatra and Caesar's love for each other remained strong, they worked hard to overcome their differences and to protect their relationship from those who wanted to destroy it. However, Caesar's assassination in 44 BC cast a shadow over their relationship. Cleopatra was devastated by the loss of her lover and the father of her child. She mourned him deeply and took steps to preserve his memory, such as building a temple in his honor. Despite the tragic end to their romance, Cleopatra and Caesar's love story remains an enduring legend, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and film. So did Cleopatra really love Julius Caesar? Most historians agree that Cleopatra and Caesar had a genuine romantic relationship. Evidence of their love can be seen in the way that they treated each other and the actions they took to protect their relationship. They gifted each other expensive presents, attended cultural events together, and Cleopatra even bore Caesar a son. Furthermore, their relationship was passionate and intense, and they were deeply in love with each other. Of course, it is important to keep in mind that we do want to have any first-hand accounts of their relationship from either Cleopatra or Caesar themselves. All of our information comes from second-hand sources such as who wrote his biography of Caesar nearly 300 years after the fact. Additionally, there is always the possibility that these ancient writers may have had their own biases, agendas when writing about Cleopatra and Caesar's relationship. It is also worth noting that Cleopatra was a political leader as well as a romantic partner to Caesar. Their relationship had a significant impact on the political landscape of the ancient world, and it is possible that Plutarch and other historians may have been influenced by these political factors when writing about their relationship. Overall, while we may never know the true extent of Cleopatra and Caesar's love for one another, there is evidence to suggest that they did indeed have a genuine and passionate relationship. Their love story has captured the imaginations of people for centuries, and it will continue to be a source of fascination for many years to come. Thank you for watching. Now it's time to make your voice heard. Vote in the poll. Did Cleopatra really love Julius Caesar? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, remember to check back soon. We'll be posting a new episode every week. In the annals of history, few figures loom as large as Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. She was a shrewd strategist, a cultured icon, and a symbol of feminine power. Yet despite her numerous accomplishments, it is perhaps her untimely demise that has immortalized her name. Join us as we explore how Cleopatra went from being a pharaoh to becoming an enduring icon whose influence continues to resonate across the ages. Cleopatra's story began in 69 BC when she was born in the ancient Egyptian city of Alexandria. Her father, Ptolemy had seized the throne with the help of Rome and made the city the capital of his new kingdom. It was a strategic move that would pay off handsomely for his descendants, especially Cleopatra, who would one day rule the kingdom alone. She was born into privilege, having been born in the royal palace of Alexandria and being educated by some of the greatest scholars of the ancient world. But she wasn't just your average princess. Cleopatra was ambitious and intelligent, eager to learn the skills necessary to govern her father's kingdom someday. While most princesses of her time were learning needlework and domestic arts, Cleopatra was studying subjects like mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. This thirst for knowledge made her an anomaly among women of her status, but it also prepared her for the challenges that lay ahead. Tragedy struck when Cleopatra was just 14 years old. Her father, Ptolemy XII, died unexpectedly, leaving the kingdom without a leader. According to historical accounts, he may have met his end accidentally, possibly due to an insect sting or poisoning. Cleopatra's mother, Cleopatra V, took charge after her husband's death and acted as regent until Cleopatra, the younger, came of age. However, there was a twist in the tale. Young Cleopatra was not supposed to inherit the throne. Instead, her father's will stipulated that she should marry her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, and that the two of them would rule together as It was an unusual arrangement, but it was not unheard of in the ancient world for siblings to rule as a royal couple. Unfortunately, this partnership between Cleopatra and her brother was far from an equal one. He was the figurehead with all the titles and privileges associated with being an Egyptian pharaoh, and she was the real power behind the throne, governing effectively as the kingdom's de facto ruler. The arrangement suited Ptolemy XIII just fine, as he spent more time on pleasure cruises around the Mediterranean than on matters of state. For Cleopatra, however, it was a frustrating situation. Not only did she lack the recognition and adulation that came with being pharaoh, but she also had to contend with the limitations placed on her by her brother's advisors, who were wary of her intelligence and ambition. Despite these setbacks, Cleopatra's intelligence and drive never wavered. She continued to study hard, mastering languages, including those of her subjects, and immersing herself in the cultural and religious traditions of Egypt. These early experiences would serve her well in the years to come, particularly when she began to assert her independence from her brother and his advisors. As Cleopatra grew older, so did her frustration with her brother's inability or unwillingness to rule effectively. There were several occasions where she had to step in to save the kingdom from disaster, such as during a civil war that broke out shortly after she turned 18. Although Cleopatra eventually prevailed in this conflict, it was clear to her that she could no longer share the throne with her brother. In 51 BC, she declared herself the sole ruler of Egypt. At the same time, her brother remained pharaoh in name only, living in luxury at the palace, while Cleopatra governed the kingdom. This arrangement lasted for a few years, but it was far from stable. The seeds of discontent had already been sown, and it would be long before they sprouted into open rebellion. By the time Cleopatra was in her mid-20s, she had established herself as a strong and capable ruler. Her intelligence and ambition were matched only by her charm and charisma, which made her popular among the people. But her brother and his advisors saw her as a threat to their power, and they wanted her gone. In 48 BC, Ptolemy XIII died under mysterious circumstances, clearing the way for Cleopatra to rule Egypt as the absolute monarch. But her troubles were far from over. Her brother's advisors wasted no time in starting a civil war, pitting Cleopatra against her own sister, Arsinoe IV. It was a brutal and bloody conflict that resulted in thousands of deaths. But ultimately, Cleopatra emerged victorious. Her enemies were defeated and she was able to consolidate her power throughout the kingdom. Yet even as Cleopatra basked in her victory, she knew that she needed allies if she was to secure her position as ruler of Egypt. One of the most powerful men in the Roman Empire, Cleopatra and Caesar met in 47 BC when he visited Alexandria. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra was so enamored with Caesar that she hatched a plan to surprise him. She had herself lowered into Caesar's court in a basket, disguised as a carpet. When Caesar looked up from his drinking party and saw Cleopatra emerging from the basket, he was astonished. It was a bold and audacious move, but it worked. The two became lovers, and Cleopatra bore Caesar a son. Together, they formed an alliance that benefited both of them. Caesar was able to strengthen his position in the eastern Mediterranean, while Cleopatra was able to secure her rule over Egypt. However, this alliance was not to last. In 44 BC, Caesar was assassinated by a group of senators. Cleopatra was devastated by his death, not only because she had lost a lover, but also because she had lost a valuable ally. With Caesar gone, Cleopatra found herself in a precarious position. The Roman Senate, which had been opposed to Caesar's relationship with Cleopatra, now saw an opportunity to deal a fatal blow to her. They declared her and her son Caesarian persona non grata, meaning they were forbidden from setting foot in Rome. But Cleopatra was not one to be cowed by her enemies. She held her ground in Alexandria, refusing to leave her home without a fight. In 41 BC, a new player entered the fray, Mark Antony, one of Caesar's close friends and a powerful member of the Roman Antony had been sent to Alexandria to investigate charges that Cleopatra had stolen valuable artifacts from a temple of the goddess Artemis. However, according to Plutarch, Antony was captivated by Cleopatra's beauty and intelligence, and soon became her lover. Together, they formed a formidable team. Antony was able to use his influence to protect Cleopatra and her kingdom from her enemies in Rome, while she was able to use her wealth and resources to enhance his power. However, this alliance was not without its critics. Many Romans saw Cleopatra as a dangerous foreigner who was corrupting their great general. And sure enough, in 37 BC, Antony's wife and sister accused Cleopatra of using witchcraft to hold her lover's affections. Although the charges were false, Antony believed them and sent Cleopatra away. For a time, it seemed as though the game was up for Cleopatra, but once again, she surprised her enemies. She used her vast network of informants to gather intelligence on Antony and his plans. Then, when he was vulnerable, she struck. She traveled to Athens and won over the people with her charm and intelligence. Then, she set her sights on Rome itself. While Antony was away campaigning in the east, Cleopatra and her son Caesarion slipped into the city unnoticed. She bribed the guards, changed her appearance to avoid detection, and set up shop in a small apartment. From here, she waited for her moment to strike. When Antony returned to Rome, he was confronted by a choice. He could either choose his wife and his political career, or he could choose Cleopatra and her kingdom. In the end, he chose Cleopatra. The couple fled to Alexandria and ruled over Egypt together for the next 5 years. During this time, they enjoyed a great deal of success. They defeated their enemies and brought peace and prosperity to their kingdoms. However, their reign of terror would not last. In 32 BC, Octavian, Antony's rival in the Roman triumvirate, declared war on Egypt. The resulting conflict became known as the War of the Egyptian Succession, or Cleopatra's War. It was a brutal and bloody conflict that resulted in the deaths of countless people, but ultimately it was a pointless one. Despite the immense power and wealth of Egypt, Cleopatra and Antony were unable to defeat Octavian's forces. In 30 BC, they were forced to flee to Alexandria, where they took their own lives rather than be captured by Octavian. Thus ended the reign of the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. As for Cleopatra, she became nothing more than a footnote in the history books. Well, that might not be entirely true. Despite the fact that Cleopatra's kingdom was conquered by Octavian, she didn't fade into oblivion. She was immortalized in literature, art, and film. Shakespeare wrote a play about her life. Artists like Botticelli and Titian created masterpieces featuring her likeness, and Hollywood has produced countless movies about her, starring everyone from Elizabeth Taylor to Angelina Jolie. But perhaps no adaptation of Cleopatra's story has had as much of an impact as the 1963 film Cleopatra. Starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, the movie was a massive hit and helped to cement Cleopatra's place in popular culture. In fact, it was so popular that it inspired a whole new generation of Cleopatra-themed everything. Today, Cleopatra's image is everywhere. She's on TV shows, in video games, and even in perfume ads. So why is Cleopatra so popular? Why does her story continue to fascinate us centuries after she died? One reason may be that Cleopatra represents something different, someone who bucked the trends and defied the odds. She was a woman in a man's world, and she used her intelligence and wit to survive and thrive. Another reason is that Cleopatra is simply a great story. Her life was full of drama, intrigue, and romance. It's the kind of story that keeps us guessing, that makes us want to know more. Whatever the reason, one thing is clear. Cleopatra's story is not over. She may have died in 30 BC, but her legend lives on. Alright guys, that's our look at how Cleopatra went from being a pharaoh to becoming an icon. How has Cleopatra's story shaped our world today? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. In the annals of history, few names resonate with the same allure and mystery as Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. She was much more than just a beautiful face. Her strategic brilliance, often overshadowed by her romantic entanglements with Roman elites, was a master manipulator who knew how to play the game of power. Today, we're going to pull back the curtains on Cleopatra and explore how she used a potent combination of charm, intelligence, and ruthlessness to hold the reins of power in one of the most turbulent eras in ancient history. The term Cleopatra is synonymous with unparalleled beauty, but her appeal went beyond just her looks. She understood the value of branding and image-making, and at a time when Egypt's prestige had waned, she took it upon herself to restore it. Upon ascending to the throne at the tender age of 14, co-ruling with her father, she embarked on a mission to reshape how the world saw Egypt. She commissioned the construction of magnificent temples, re-established trade routes, and introduced economic reforms that stabilized the kingdom's finances. It was under her rule that Alexandria, Egypt's cultural hub, became renowned as one of the world's wealthiest cities. But Cleopatra's ambitions didn't stop at restoring Egypt's past glory. She set her sights on something even more audacious, expanding her kingdom's borders and challenging the status quo. While her father steered the kingdom with a focus on trade and diplomacy, Cleopatra's interests were more aligned with military strategy and expansionism. She studied military tactics, trained soldiers, and kept a close eye on Egypt's neighbors, always looking for an opportunity to strike. This thirst for power was not merely a lust for control, but a calculated desire to protect her kingdom from the encroaching forces of Rome. Cleopatra's story unfolds against the backdrop of a world on the cusp of dramatic change. The Roman Republic was expanding its influence across the Mediterranean, casting a long shadow over Egypt's western border. Recognizing the potential threat, Cleopatra shrewdly reached out to Rome, forging strategic alliances through marriage. She first wed a Roman senator, then later captured the heart of Julius Caesar. These connections didn't just bring Rome into her sphere of influence, they also made her a powerful player in the political game of the Roman Empire. With Caesar's support, Cleopatra successfully navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics, securing her position and resources for Egypt. But this alliance came at a cost. As Egypt became increasingly entangled with Rome, Cleopatra's dependence on Roman favor grew, setting the stage for a tragic fall. As the winds of change swept through Rome, Cleopatra found herself caught in the crossfire of a power struggle between two titans, Octavian and Mark Antony. Initially, she had tried to stay neutral, skillfully playing both sides, but as the battle lines were drawn, she was forced to choose. Her choice fell on Mark Antony, a charismatic general and one of Caesar's heirs apparent. He was known for his military prowess and his penchant for lavish displays of power. For Cleopatra, he represented a chance to solidify her kingdom's independence from Rome and potentially expand her influence. Their relationship was a whirlwind romance that defied the boundaries of cultures and continents. They met in secret, exchanging vows in a hidden temple deep within the Egyptian desert. This clandestine ceremony bound them not just in love, but in shared ambition. Together, they plotted to defy the odds and secure their place in history. But their love affair wasn't just a tale of romance. It was a strategic map. By marrying Antony, Cleopatra gained a powerful ally in her struggle against Octavian, who would later become the first emperor of Rome. Their union sent shockwaves across the empire, challenging the very foundations of Roman authority. However, their defiance didn't go unnoticed. Octavian, fueled by jealousy and a lust for power, declared war on Egypt. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of not just Egypt, but the entire Mediterranean world. As the armies of Octavian and Mark Antony clashed, Cleopatra proved to be a brilliant strategist, utilizing her kingdom's wealth and resources to great effect. She built up a formidable navy, trained elite troops, and formed alliances with other kingdoms, all while maintaining a facade of neutrality. Her goal was clear: to outmaneuver Octavian and ensure the survival of her kingdom. Cleopatra's strategy was one of calculated risks and daring maneuvers. She exploited Octavian's vulnerabilities, striking when he least expected it, and retreating into the labyrinthine canals of Alexandria when he pursued her. Her knowledge of the city, its waterways, and its people was unmatched, turning Alexandria into a fortress that Octavian's forces struggled to penetrate. Yet despite her best efforts, Cleopatra's star began to fade as Octavian's forces closed in on Alexandria. With the noose tightening around her, she made a fateful decision to flee to India in the hope of enlisting their support against Octavian. However, her journey was cut short when her ship anchored in the harbor of Actium, a small Greek city on the west coast of the Mar. It was here that the final act of Cleopatra's life and legacy was played out. As news of her arrival spread, the people of Actium rose up, forcing her to flee once more. This time there was no escape. With her fleet destroyed and her army demoralized, Cleopatra retreated to her palace in Alexandria. There, on the banks of the Nile, her story came to an end. Rather than face capture and humiliation at the hands of her enemies, she chose to take her own life. According to legend, she did so by allowing an asp, a venomous snake, to bite her. Cleopatra's death was not just the end of a ruler's life, it was the closing of a chapter in history. With her passing, the Ptolemaic dynasty came to an end, and Egypt fell under the rule of Rome, marking a significant shift in the balance of power in the ancient world. Her legacy, however, continued to live on in the annals of history. In the centuries that followed, stories of her intelligence, charm, and ruthlessness echoed through the ages, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and film. Despite the tragedy of her demise, Cleopatra's impact on history is undeniable. She was a true daughter of the Nile, a ruler who left an indelible mark on the course of ancient history. Her story serves as a reminder of the complexities of power, the allure of ambition, and the timeless appeal of a woman who dared to defy the odds and claim her place among the greats. From her strategic brilliance in navigating the treacherous waters of Roman politics to her passionate love affair with Mark Antony, Cleopatra's life was a tapestry woven with threads of intrigue, romance, and relentless ambition. Her charm was legendary, her intellect unmatched, and her spirit a force to be reckoned with. As we delve deeper into her story, we uncover a woman who transcended the confines of her time, leaving an enduring legacy that continues to captivate us today. Cleopatra's story is a testament to the boundless curiosity that lies within each of us. Just as she delved into multiple languages and cultures, so too should we embrace the joy of discovery. Let us, like Cleopatra, keep our minds open to new experiences and our hearts receptive to the myriad wonders that life has in store for us. Her thirst for knowledge, her passion for understanding different cultures, and her courage to venture into the unknown were truly remarkable. She was a true Renaissance woman long before the term was coined, excelling in various fields and pushing the boundaries of what was expected of her as a female ruler. As we reflect on Cleopatra's life, let us be inspired by her insatiable curiosity and strive to make learning a lifelong adventure. After all, as the great philosopher Socrates once said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And what a life Cleopatra lived, examined and celebrated. She was a woman who refused to be defined by the limitations of her time, forever etching her name in the annals of history. May her stories serve as a beacon, reminding us that with an inquisitive mind and an unwavering spirit, we, too, can leave our own unique mark on the world. So the next time you find yourself in the bustling streets of Athens or the serene gardens of Alexandria, take a moment to pause and reflect on the profound impact that Cleopatra had on the course of history. Her legacy lives on in the ruins of the ancient world, waiting for us to uncover and appreciate the brilliance of one of the most fascinating women of all time.
Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, was renowned for her unmatched beauty. But how accurate is this popular portrayal? How did she maintain a beauty regime? And what's the secret behind her famous beauty mask? Welcome to my channel! And today, let's find out the secrets of Cleopatra's beauty regime. The history of Cleopatra fascinates us with tales of an unmatched queen whose allure knew no bounds. Popular culture often portrays her as a symbol of timeless beauty. But beyond the myths and legends, who was Cleopatra really? How did she maintain her beauty regime? And what's the secret behind her famous beauty mask? Join us as we unravel the mysteries surrounding one of the most iconic women in history. Cleopatra VII, often referred to as Cleopatra the Great, was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. She ascended to the throne at the tender age of 14, succeeding her father Ptolemy XII. Despite her young age, Cleopatra displayed remarkable leadership skills and wisdom, guiding her kingdom through turbulent times. Cleopatra's journey to power was fraught with challenges. Upon her father's death, Egypt was in turmoil, caught between the ambitions of Rome and the Seleucid Empire. Yet Cleopatra, with her sharp intellect and diplomatic prowess, managed to secure alliances that safeguarded her kingdom's interests. Her strategic marriage to her brother Ptolemy XIII further solidified her position, although the union was more a matter of political necessity than genuine affection. However, tragedy struck when Ptolemy XIII perished during military campaigns, leaving Cleopatra as the sole ruler of Egypt. This marked a significant turning point in her life, as she now shouldered the responsibility of governing an empire without a partner to share the burden. Undeterred, Cleopatra proved equal to the task, demonstrating remarkable resilience and strength in the face of adversity. Her intelligence and quick thinking were evident in all aspects of her reign. Cleopatra understood the importance of appearances and the role they played in maintaining power. She cultivated an image of herself as a goddess, using her beauty and charm to influence those around her. In fact, it was during this period that Cleopatra began experimenting with different beauty regimes and products, seeking the perfect combination to enhance her natural allure. One of Cleopatra's most enduring beauty secrets was her use of milk as a cosmetic product. Legend has it that she would bathe in donkey milk, believing it enhanced her skin's softness and radiance. This unusual practice became a testament to her dedication to achieving and maintaining her desired beauty standards. Cleopatra wasn't just a patron of beauty. She was a scientist in her own right. She delved into the world of chemistry, experimenting with concoctions to perfect her appearance. One of her most famous creations was a beauty mask made from the fermented extract of beetroot. This mask was not just a random creation, it was the result of Cleopatra's keen observation and understanding of the properties of different ingredients. The beetroot, with its high concentration of antioxidants and nutrients, was an ideal ingredient for creating a nourishing and complexion-enhancing mask. But what was the secret behind the fermentation process? Why did Cleopatra choose to ferment the beetroot extract? Fermentation, a controlled process of organic matter decomposition by microorganisms, was a technique Cleopatra used to enhance the efficacy of her beauty products. By fermenting the beetroot extract, she unlocked a myriad of benefits that improved the overall quality and effectiveness of the mask. One of the key advantages of fermented extracts is their increased stability. During fermentation, microorganisms break down unstable compounds, resulting in a more stable and longer-lasting product. This was particularly important for Cleopatra, who likely had to transport her beauty products across vast distances within her empire. Furthermore, fermentation enhances the absorption of nutrients and the process intensifies the natural properties present in the beetroot, ensuring that when applied to the skin, they are more readily absorbed and utilized. This led to a deeper level of nourishment and rejuvenation, contributing to Cleopatra's radiant complexion. But the benefits didn't stop there. Fermentation also played a crucial role in balancing the pH levels of the beauty products. By adjusting the acidity or alkalinity of the mask, Cleopatra ensured that it was suitable for her skin, preventing any adverse reactions or irritations. This attention to detail and understanding of the science behind her beauty regime set Cleopatra apart, allowing her to achieve a level of beauty that became the stuff of legends. The story of Cleopatra and her famous beauty mask is a testament to the lengths to which she went to achieve and maintain a desired look. From bathing in donkey milk to experimenting with fermented beetroot extracts, Cleopatra was a true pioneer in the world of beauty. But why was it so important for Cleopatra to have a picture-perfect appearance? As the ruler of Egypt, Cleopatra understood the significance of her image. It wasn't just about personal vanity, but a strategic tool to project power, influence, and stability. In a world where kingdoms were often defined by the strength and allure of their rulers, Cleopatra knew that looking the part was just as important as being the part. Her beauty regime was not merely a set of personal rituals, but a carefully crafted presentation to the world. It was a declaration to her subjects and rivals that she was not just a pretty face, but a force to be reckoned with. Cleopatra's obsession with her appearance was deeply rooted in her desire to preserve the legacy of her Ptolemaic dynasty. She saw her beauty as a reflection of the greatness of her kingdom and took great pride in upholding the standards set by her predecessors. For Cleopatra, it was not enough to simply rule Egypt. She wanted to do so with unmatched elegance and sophistication. Her beauty regime was a reflection of this desire, a manifestation of her belief that true power lay not only in military might and political acumen, but also in the projection of an unrivaled image of beauty and regality. But Cleopatra's story doesn't end with her legendary beauty. Her life was filled with dramatic turns, passionate romances, and tragic losses that continue to captivate us even today. Her relationship with Roman General Julius Caesar was a whirlwind romance that resulted in the birth of her son. This union brought Egypt closer to Rome, forging a bond that would shape the destinies of both nations. However, Caesar's assassination plunged Cleopatra back into the throes of uncertainty and danger. Undeterred, she turned her attention to Mark Antony, another powerful Roman general. With Antony, Cleopatra found love once again, and their partnership was both passionate and politically advantageous. They ruled over Egypt and several Roman provinces, forming a formidable power couple that challenged the established order. Yet their reign of love and power was not destined to last. Octavian Caesar's adopted son and heir emerged as a formidable rival, determined to crush Cleopatra and secure control of the Roman Empire. The ensuing conflict culminated in the Battle of Actium in 32 BC, where Cleopatra and Mark Antony's navies were decisively defeated by Octavian's forces, facing the prospect of capture and humiliation. Cleopatra and Mark Antony chose a tragic end, taking their own lives rather than submitting to their enemies. Their deaths marked the end of an era, signaling the decline of the Ptolemaic kingdom and the rise of Roman dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. The story of Cleopatra and her beauty mask continues to intrigue and inspire. Her innovative approach to beauty, her relentless pursuit of perfection, and her tragic demise have made her a timeless icon. Whether through historical accounts or fictional portrayals, Cleopatra's legacy lives on, reminding us of the captivating allure of one of history's most enigmatic queens. As we conclude our journey into the world of Cleopatra, we are left with a sense of awe and admiration for a woman who dared to dream big and strive for perfection. Her story transcends time, serving as a reminder that the pursuit of excellence knows no bounds and that the quest for beauty, though often challenging, can lead to extraordinary discovery. What did you think about Cleopatra's fermented beauty mask? Did you know about it before watching this video? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And we'll see you next time.
Cleopatra, Queen of the Nile. Beautiful, intelligent, seductive. She was the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt and is said to have been one of history's greatest seducers. But we all know how that story goes. She seduced the Roman general Mark Antony, bear his 2 children, lose her kingdom, and ultimately take her own life rather than live under Roman domination. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. While it is true that Cleopatra did indeed bear children with Mark Antony, and that Egypt did fall to Rome during her lifetime, there is more to the story than just romance gone wrong. For example, while we think of Cleopatra today as being this iconic seductress, at the time people didn't necessarily see her that way. In fact, if you would ask most people in the 1st century BC what they thought of Cleopatra, they would have told you that she was an upstanding ruler, someone who cared deeply for the prosperity of her people. And that's why when her statue was erected in the Roman Colosseum after her death, it was inscribed with the words Cleopatra, the divine, or Cleopatra, goddess of the Romans. So in today's video, let's look beyond seduction and explore Cleopatra's role in shaping the fate of Egypt. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC to parents who were both of Macedonian descent. Her father, Ptolemy XII, had actually been appointed king of Egypt by none other than Julius Caesar. He'd seized the throne from his sister, Cleopatra VII, who ruled alongside her husband, Ptolemy XIII. But after only a few years of ruling, he died, leaving Cleopatra, who was around 14 at the time, and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, co-regents of Egypt. However, their reign was far from peaceful. Following the death of their father, Cleopatra's uncle, who had been the high priest of the Egyptian god, Amen, effectively seized control of the country and attempted to depose the young courageous. Thankfully, the pair was able to escape to Rome, where they spent several years in exile. During this time, Cleopatra studied various subjects, including languages, which would prove incredibly useful later in life. Eventually, though it seemed as if their exile was coming to an end as Julius Caesar had declared war on Cleopatra's uncle and was marching his troops towards Egypt, and upon hearing this news, Cleopatra and Ptolemy returned to Alexandria and took back the throne. Though living in relative peace for the rest of their lives, Cleopatra and Ptolemy didn't exactly get along. In fact, Cleopatra was actually married to her brother at the time, but she had him put to death in 51 BC, after he tried to assert dominance over her. Now, some sources claim that Cleopatra only killed her brother because he was trying to steal all the power for himself. But others believe that she was simply protecting the interests of her son, who had been born to her and Julius Caesar during his visit to Alexandria a few years prior. Now, for a number of reasons. It is unlikely that Caesarion would ever be accepted as the legitimate heir to the throne by the Egyptian people. First of all, he wasn't actually of royal blood, unlike Cleopatra and her brother. Secondly, the Egyptians viewed Caesarion as a foreigner, as he looked nothing like Cleopatra and instead bore an uncanny resemblance to Julius Caesar. Nonetheless, Cleopatra made sure that Caesarion was proclaimed pharaoh after her death, so that he could continue her dynasty. As I mentioned earlier, despite her many accomplishments as a ruler, Cleopatra has become infamous for her supposed seductiveness. And it all began with an incident that occurred in 48 BC, when Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria following his victory over Pompey at the Battle of Pharsalia. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra was so enamored with the famous Roman general that she hatched a plan to seduce him. She disguised herself as the Egyptian goddess of love, Aphrodite, and then snuck into Caesar's chambers while he was asleep. And it's said that when Caesar awoke and saw the half-veiled woman standing over him, he was immediately smitten. While Plutarch does admit that this tale sounds a little he says that it was related to him by a priestess of Aphrodite. What we do know, however, is that following this supposed Caesar helped Cleopatra regain her throne and solidify her power over Egypt. The two also welcomed a son named who was proclaimed pharaoh of Egypt. Now, whether or not their relationship began in the way Plutarch describes is up for debate. It's possible that the story was exaggerated or completely fabricated in order to make Cleopatra look foolish. After all, it was written by one of her rivals, Octavian, who went on to become the first emperor of Rome. However, we do know that soon after Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, Cleopatra became involved with another prominent Roman, Mark Antony, who was one of Caesar's adopted sons. The pair had a whirlwind romance that resulted in the birth of twins, and Antony declaring Cleopatra his queen. But their relationship was not viewed favorably by Antony's fellow, especially Octavian, who was furious that Antony had broken protocol by naming Cleopatra his heir. To make matters worse, Cleopatra's presence over Antony led him to break away from Rome and declare war on Octavian. But unfortunately for Cleopatra and Antony, the people of Rome were on their side, and Octavian was soon given full control of the empire. Knowing that Octavian wouldn't be merciful, the couple took their own lives. So while it's true that Cleopatra's romantic relationships played a significant role in her life, at least one of them was not what her detractors claimed. As we can see, Cleopatra had a great deal of agency when it came to her relationships, and she used it to secure the future of herself and her children. She also didn't have complete control over the outcome of these relationships. Aside from her romantic entanglements, Cleopatra was also known as a wise and effective ruler who worked tirelessly to benefit her people. Under her guidance, Egypt experienced a period of economic prosperity and cultural flourishing. She also implemented policies that promoted religious tolerance and freedom of speech. Additionally, Cleopatra was a patron of the arts and sciences, and her court was a center of intellectual activity. She commissioned the construction of numerous public buildings, including libraries, temples, and theaters, and she also established a museum, which was one of the largest and most comprehensive collections of art and antiquities in the ancient world. But perhaps Cleopatra's most significant contribution to Egypt was her efforts to revive the country's economy. When she took the throne, Egypt was in a state of decline and the treasury was virtually empty. However, thanks to her efforts to promote trade and industry, the economy soon began to recover. She also introduced a new currency and reformed the tax system, which helped to stabilize the economy and make it more efficient. Sadly though, despite all of Cleopatra's hard work and dedication to her people, her legacy has been largely overshadowed by her reputation as a seductress. This is likely due in part to the fact that she was the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt, and thus her story was ripe for romanticization and embellishment. But it is also possible that Cleopatra's gender and sexuality was seen as threatening by her male contemporaries, particularly those in positions of power. After all, she was a queen who ruled over one of the most powerful kingdoms in the ancient world, and she was not afraid to use her power to further her own interests. It's important to remember, too, that Cleopatra lived in a time when women were expected to be submissive and obedient to men, yet she defied these expectations and lived her life on her own terms. Not only did she engage in multiple romantic relationships with powerful men, but she also had a son out of wedlock. Furthermore, Cleopatra was well educated and spoke several languages, including Egyptian. In a patriarchal society like ancient Egypt, this would have been highly unusual. In conclusion, Cleopatra was much more than just a seductress. Sure, she had relationships with powerful men like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, but she was also a brilliant strategist and a devoted mother. She was a strong and independent woman who ruled over her kingdom with wisdom and grace. Although she may have lost her life in the end, Cleopatra's legacy as one of history's greatest queens will live on forever. I hope you enjoyed learning more about Cleopatra and her role as the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt. If you did, please be sure to like this video and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cleopatra, one of the most notorious names in history, this Egyptian queen had a life that could have been ripped straight out of a Hollywood movie. She was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, a powerful force in the Mediterranean, who had amassed great wealth and influence by trading in the riches of the East and acting as an intermediary between Europe and Asia. She is also remembered for her intelligence, beauty, and charisma. In fact, according to some historians, it was this intelligence that helped her build up Alexandria into one of the biggest cities in the ancient world. And she was definitely aware of how important her image was to people, so much so that she made sure that coins featuring her face were produced throughout her reign, ensuring that everyone from the poorest peasant to the richest merchant would know what their queen looked like. But it was her romantic relationships, particularly with Roman leaders Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, which immortalized her name in human history. The two lovers were infamous for their passionate relationship, and are thought to have met when Cleopatra sent him a letter begging for his help in her fight against her brother and sister. But despite the passion they shared together, both relationships would end in tragedy, with both Caesar and Antony meeting violent ends. And Cleopatra wasn't far behind them. Her story is a fascinating one, and though a lot of what we know about her comes from sources that may have been written by her enemies, there's still plenty of evidence around that shows us just how interesting this queen really was. Let's take a look at the life and legacy of Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra was born on July 69 BC in the city of Alexandria in Egypt. Her mother was Cleopatra VII, while her father was Ptolemy XII. At this point in history, Egypt was ruled by a dynasty of Greek origin descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals, Ptolemy I, though Egyptian in terms of location. The Ptolemaic kingdom was therefore more closely linked to Greece than to the rest of Africa. When Cleopatra was born, her father was co-regent with her grandfather, Ptolemy XI, but the elder Ptolemy died in 80 BC, leaving the throne to Cleopatra's father. Because the new king was only 14 years old at the time, Cleopatra was effectively the real ruler of Egypt, controlling the kingdom through her father. However, after he married Cleopatra's paternal aunt Bernice, the young princess lost favor and had to flee the country. It is believed that she took refuge in Syria, where she lived for several years before her father's untimely death in 80 BC. Now once again, Cleopatra's aunt Bernice was in control of the kingdom, but she didn't hold power for long. Soon after she became regent, she was beheaded at the orders of Cleopatra, who returned to Alexandria to reclaim her throne. Although she had taken back her position as the ruler of Egypt, Cleopatra did not yet have complete control. At age 14, she shared power with her 10-year-old brother and lover, Ptolemy XIII. The pair had been married since Cleopatra was 11, but soon after, Cleopatra reclaimed the throne. She had her brother put to death. Historians believe that Ptolemy had become too much of a threat to his sister, and that she had him assassinated because she wanted sole control of Egypt. With her younger brother out of the way, Cleopatra turned her attention to forging alliances outside of Egypt, and this is when she set her sights on Rome. There is no doubt that Cleopatra understood the importance of projecting a certain image, and that she used her vast wealth to do so. For example, historians tell us that she went to great lengths to make sure that her portrait was minted on all the different coins produced throughout her realm. This was important because it meant that everyone knew exactly what she looked like, whether they were rich or poor. She was keenly aware of the propaganda potential of her image and how it could be used to promote her interests. According to historian Stacy Schiff, this was because Cleopatra knew the value of publicity and understood how to use the visual arts to get the word out. Cleopatra, his first attempt to forge ties with Rome, ended up getting her imprisoned in Rome for 2 years. But it wasn't because she'd done something wrong. Instead, it was because her brother Ptolemy had convinced the Roman Senate that she was planning on assassinating him and taking full control of Egypt. To avoid any confrontation with the Romans, Cleopatra had to spend 2 years locked up, until she was finally able to clear her name. However, during her imprisonment, she learned an important lesson about Roman politics, and this served her well later on when she began her affair with Julius Caesar. Once she was cleared of her brother's accusations, Cleopatra wasted no time cementing her position as the ruler of Egypt. She solidified her power base, reformed the economy, rebuilt infrastructure, and launched an invasion into Nubia in the south. In addition, she continued to reach out to Rome, and it was long before she caught the eye of Julius Caesar, the dictator of the Roman Republic. It is believed that the two first met in 48 BC, when Caesar fled to Egypt after losing the Battle of Pharsalus against forces led by his former ally, Pompey the Great. According to Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra, Caesar entered the city on horseback wearing armor and a crown, and though he was exhausted and sweaty, Cleopatra was immediately smitten. There's some debate over how exactly the two actually met, though most accounts agree that Cleopatra presented herself to Caesar in rather humble fashion. According to Plutarch, she had herself lowered down into Caesar's court by means of a basket attached to a rope. It was an impressive entrance, and it must have made quite the impression on the Roman leader. But Plutarch goes on to say that Caesar found Cleopatra much less impressive upon actually meeting her. Caesar was expecting a beautiful, exotic queen, but instead he found her to be rather ordinary looking. Still, the two of them would go on to develop a romantic relationship, and Cleopatra would bear Caesar a son named Caesarion in 47 BC, while historians debate whether or not Caesar considered Caesarion to be his legitimate son. Cleopatra certainly treated him as such. After Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, Cleopatra named her son Corrigent, probably in an effort to secure his claim to the throne. But Caesarion's reign wouldn't last long. Less than a year after Caesar's death, Cleopatra's lover and ally, Julius Caesar, had come into conflict with Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. In 42 BC, Caesar and Cleopatra's forces suffered a decisive defeat at the Battle of Actium. Now desperate, the two lovers fled to Egypt. But this was a fatal mistake. See, Octavian had chased after them and he was closing in on their location. According to Plutarch, Cleopatra and Mark Antony planned to flee to India, where they believed they could live out the remainder of their lives in relative peace. But before they could leave, Octavian arrived, and his forces laid siege to the city. Realizing that escape was impossible, the lovers decided to take their own lives. Mark Antony died by sword, while Cleopatra opted for a more exotic method. Legend says that she allowed an Egyptian snake to crawl into her arms and bite her as she held the ASP close to her heart. It's an iconic story and one that has cemented Cleopatra's name in human history. Though Cleopatra is often remembered for her tragic fate, it's important to remember that she was a powerful and intelligent leader. In fact, many historians argue that her intelligence is what allowed her to keep Egypt prosperous and stable for so long. She was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, and her efforts helped to preserve the culture and traditions of ancient Egypt for centuries. Despite the fact that Cleopatra was Greek, not Egyptian, she made every effort to connect with her subjects. She learned their language, customs, and religion, and even built temples to local deities. As a result, she was revered by many Egyptians as a kind of goddess. Cleopatra's relationship with Rome was complicated. On the one hand, she saw the Romans as a useful tool to maintain Egypt's power and wealth. On the other hand, she was acutely aware of the dangers that Rome posed to her kingdom. Nevertheless, she managed to navigate Roman politics successfully for most of her reign. In fact, she was so successful that she is often credited with helping to turn Egypt into a cultural hub of the ancient world. During Cleopatra's reign, Alexandria became one of the largest and most cosmopolitan cities in the Mediterranean. It was home to people from all over the known world, including Greeks, Romans, Jews, and Egyptians. Cleopatra also took steps to protect Egypt's natural resources. She established a royal monopoly on the export of papyrus, for example, and she invested in the construction of canals to irrigate the Nile Delta. These policies helped to ensure that Egypt would remain a wealthy and powerful kingdom for many years to come. So while Cleopatra's story may have ended in tragedy, her legacy as one of the greatest leaders of the ancient world remains secure. Cleopatra VII truly was a remarkable woman. She was a shrewd politician, a brilliant strategist, a patron of the arts, and a devout worshipper of her gods. She may have met a tragic end, but her story continues to inspire awe and wonder today. What are your thoughts on Cleopatra? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, Be sure to check out more content. Thanks for watching.